Hey guys. Tonight we stand in the half-light of an Edo-era sumo stable. The kind of place where dawn creeps in like a shy cat and the air already smells of rice steam, old wood, and the faint sour edge of sweat that never truly leaves. You are here, in this moment, wrapped in a thin cotton robe, listening to the slow breathing of massive bodies around you. Each rise and fall like waves against a harbor wall. Somewhere outside, a rooster is doing his best impression of an alarm clock that nobody asked for. You can almost feel the chill on your skin and the promise of a long, punishing day ahead, and honestly, watching from your cozy bed centuries later, you'd probably think, yeah, you definitely wouldn't survive this life. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment telling me where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are lying on a thin straw mat inside a heiau, a sumo stable in Edo, Japan, and the first thing you notice is how crowded the air feels. Not crowded with people, though there are plenty of those, but crowded with history, hierarchy, and unspoken rules. Your body is heavy, not just from muscle and fat, but from the knowledge that you are at the very bottom of a ladder that seems to stretch all the way up into the rafters. Above you sleep the senior wrestlers, men whose names echo in tournaments and tea houses, while you, the newcomer, are close enough to the floor to feel its cold breath seep through the straw. You push yourself up quietly, because even the sound of moving wrong can earn you a sharp look. And in this world, a sharp look is often just the opening act. The Edo period, after all, is not gentle with those who are slow to learn. Sumo is already a national obsession, sponsored by temples, supported by the shogunate, and adored by townspeople who crowd around the ring the way modern fans crowd around stadiums and glowing screens. This is not just sport, it is ritual, religion, and social theater rolled into one enormous, stomping package. As you step outside, the sky is a pale gray, like watered-down ink, the courtyard is damp, and the packed earth under your bare feet feels cool, almost soothing, which is ironic, because in a few minutes those same feet will be slamming into the ground with the force of falling furniture. You can hear the senior rikishi already beginning their warm-ups, the low thud of shika, the leg-stomping exercise meant to drive away evil spirits and, very practically, to strengthen hips and thighs. Each stomp is a reminder that this life is built on repetition and pain, seasoned with just a little spirituality, like salt on a very large bowl of rice. One of the most famous historical facts about Edo-era sumo is that it was deeply tied to Shinto rituals. Tournaments were often held to pray for good harvests or to appease the gods. And the ring itself was considered sacred. That's why you see the rope boundary, the ceremonial salt throne, and the careful, almost theatrical movements before a bout. What fewer people realize is that in the early mornings, before any crowds or ceremonies, the doyo was just a patch of cold clay that had to be swept and smoothed by the lowest-ranked wrestlers, people like you. Historians still debate how much of this daily labor was meant as spiritual discipline and how much was simply a very efficient way to remind juniors of their place. You grab a broom and begin sweeping, the straw bristles whispering against the ground. It's oddly calming, like brushing crumbs off a table. If that table were the size of a small room and your future depended on how clean it looked. The stable master watches from the doorway. Arms folded, eyes half-lidded. He has seen generations come and go. Boys who arrived skinny and hopeful. Men who left broken or, if they were lucky, honored. In Edo Japan, the path of a sumo wrestler could lead to fame and patronage by powerful daimyo. Or it could lead to obscurity and aching joints that forecast the weather better than any barometer. As the light grows stronger, training begins in earnest. You line up with the other juniors, facing the seniors, and the air seems to tighten. Like the moment before a storm, the first clash of bodies is loud. A wet, meaty sound that makes you think of two sides of beef colliding in a marketplace. It's not elegant, and it's definitely not gentle. You brace yourself, step forward, and feel the shock travel from your shoulders down through your spine, rattling you like loose change in a pocket. There's a strange comfort in the routine, though, the repetition of drills, the rhythm of breath and movement, the shared exhaustion. It's a bit like a very intense group workout class. Except the instructor is tradition itself. And it does not believe in rest days. A well-known historical event that everyone in Edo would recognize is the establishment of official tournament rankings during the Tokugawa shogunate, which formalized who was at the top and who, like you, was at the bottom. That ranking system shaped not just competition, but daily life in the stable, deciding who ate first, who bathed first, and who got the softest sleeping spot. And here's a lesser-known detail: in some stables, juniors weren't even allowed to use soap regularly, because the smell of sweat was thought to be a kind of badge. Proof of hard training. Imagine that today. An entire gym proudly declaring, "No deodorant. It builds character." Historians still argue about how much of this was practical, given limited resources, and how much was a cultural belief that endurance included enduring your own scent. As you drop into another squat, thighs burning, you catch a glimpse of steam rising from the kitchen area. That will be chankanabe later, the famous stew that fuels these massive bodies. For now, it's just a promise, like the idea of coffee when you're still half asleep. The senior wrestlers move with surprising grace for men of their size. Their motions honed by years of the same drills you're now stumbling through. You try to mirror them, feeling awkward, like a kid copying dance moves from a video that's playing just a little too fast. There's a quiet humor in the situation. If you let yourself see it, you, a human being, deliberately training to become as heavy and immovable as possible, in a society that otherwise values restraint and subtlety. It's like signing up to be a walking boulder in a country famous for its delicate gardens and paper walls. And yet, this contrast is exactly what makes sumo so captivating to the people of Edo. The session ends, at least for now, and you bow, sweat dripping from your chin onto the earth you just cleaned. Your muscles tremble, but there's also a flicker of pride. You survived the morning, not conquered it, not mastered it, just survived. In this world, that's the first victory. And as you stand there, listening to your own heartbeat slowly settle, you sense that this is only the beginning of a long, relentless story, one that will test your body, your patience, and your sense of who you are, over and over again, in ways you can't yet imagine. The steam from the kitchen grows thicker, curling through the wooden beams like a lazy ghost, and your stomach answers with a low, traitorous growl. Breakfast in the Heya is not a polite affair. It is survival, strategy, and, in your case, a reminder of how small you still are in a world built for giants. You line up behind the other juniors, bowls in hand, eyes lowered, because looking too eager is almost as bad as looking disrespectful. The senior wrestlers eat first, their chopsticks moving with the steady confidence of men who know the food will never run out for them. For you, every grain of rice feels like a tiny investment in a future body that does not yet exist. As you wait, your mind drifts back to the village you came from, a place where meals were modest and meat was a luxury saved for festivals. In the Edo period, most commoners lived on rice, vegetables, and the occasional bit of fish. The idea of eating multiple huge meals a day, rich with protein and fat, would have sounded like fantasy. Yet here you are, about to be handed a bowl of chankanabe so dense and steaming it looks like it could fog up a mirror, or a small window. Or possibly the entire room. It's almost funny, in a modern way, like being told you must eat 3 family-sized pizzas before noon because it's for your career. Recruitment into sumo often began in childhood. And you are no exception. Talent scouts, usually connected to stables or local patrons, traveled through rural areas looking for boys with broad frames or unusual strength. A well-known historical practice was that poor families sometimes offered their sons willingly. Seeing sumo as a path out of poverty and into a life with steady food and potential fame. The moment you were chosen is etched in your memory, the stable representative bowing to your parents. The formal words, the promise that you would be cared for and trained. It sounded noble, almost ceremonial, like being selected for a sacred order. What you didn't fully grasp then was how complete the separation would be. Once you entered the Heya, your old life didn't just pause, it faded. Like a village road disappearing behind a bend. Letters were rare, visits even rarer. Your world shrank to this compound. These routines, these men, and yet, in another sense, your world also expanded. You were now part of something that Edo itself buzzed about. Something people argued over in bathhouses and tea shops. Which wrestler was strongest? Which bout was the most thrilling? Which stable would produce the next champion? You finally receive your bowl and retreat to the corner where juniors eat. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, the stew is thick with vegetables, tofu, and chunks of fish and meat. You lift it carefully, the heat seeping into your palms, and take your first mouthful. It's rich, salty, comforting in a way that makes you understand why this dish became legendary among wrestlers. Every spoonful feels like it's building you, brick by brick, into someone new. There's a strange, almost tender thought that crosses your mind, somewhere, long before protein shakes and calorie counting apps. People already understood the basic equation: eat big, grow big, push hard. A curious, lesser-known fact about Edo-era sumo is that some stables kept detailed food records. Not out of scientific interest, but to ensure that juniors were not secretly skimping or hoarding. The idea was that discipline extended even to appetite. You were expected to eat until full, then eat a little more, because tomorrow's training demanded it. Historians still debate whether this strict control over diet was primarily about physical development or about reinforcing obedience and uniformity within the stable. As you eat, you watch the seniors from the corner of your eye. Their bodies are massive, yes, but what strikes you more is their calm. They move slowly, deliberately, like mountains that have learned patience. One of them catches you staring and raises an eyebrow. You quickly look back to your bowl, suddenly fascinated by a piece of carrot. In your head, you joke that carrots have never been this interesting in your entire life. It's either that or imagine yourself being flicked across the room like a pebble. And honestly, humor feels safer. After the meal, chores resume. You scrub pots, carry water, and help clean the bath. A large wooden tub that will later hold bodies so heavy the waterline rises like a miniature tide. Bathing, you learn, is not just about hygiene. It is another marker of rank. Seniors bathe first, in the hottest water, while you and the other juniors wait. Steam filling the room, skin prickling in anticipation. By the time it's your turn, the water is still warm. But the symbolism is clear. Even relaxation follows the latter. The afternoon brings more training, but of a different kind. You are taught basic movements. How to plant your feet. How to lower your center of gravity. How to fall without injuring yourself too badly. Falling is important. You will do it a lot. The ground is unforgiving, and your body learns quickly that gravity in Edo Japan is just as serious as gravity anywhere else. A senior demonstrates a throw, and you try to copy it, only to end up in a tangle of limbs and embarrassment. Someone chuckles softly, not cruelly, just enough to remind you that mastery is a long road. A famous historical event often discussed in sumo lore is the formalization of stable systems under the Tokugawa shogunate, which helped regulate training, rankings, and tournaments. This structure turned what had once been more loosely organized bouts into a professional world with clear pathways and expectations. For someone like you, it meant that your childhood was being reshaped according to a national institution, not just a local tradition. There is also an odd, almost secret detail you overhear. Some stables believed that the spirit of past champions lingered in the training grounds. Juniors were told to bow to certain corners of the yard, not because there was a shrine, but because great men once stood there. Whether this was meant to inspire reverence or simply keep you mindful of where you were stepping is unclear. Historians still debate how much of these practices were sincere spiritual beliefs and how much were tools to cultivate discipline through atmosphere and suggestion. As evening approaches, the light softens, turning the wooden walls a warm gold. Your muscles ache in that deep, satisfying way that tells you they've been worked, maybe even slightly abused, but not yet broken. You sit again on your mat, listening to the sounds of the stable settling, low voices, the clink of bowls, the distant noise of Edo's streets beyond the gate. Somewhere, a vendor calls out, and for a moment, you imagine the outside world continuing its busy rhythm, unaware of your small, intense universe within these walls. You lie back, staring up at the beams, and think about the path ahead. Childhood, in the usual sense, is slipping away from you, replaced by routines that feel ancient and unyielding. There's a faint, almost ironic comfort in that. Rules tell you who you are, what you do, when you eat, when you sleep. In a strange way, it simplifies life. You don't have to decide much, you only have to endure, learn, and grow. And as your eyes begin to close, one last, slightly absurd thought floats through your mind. Somewhere in the future, people will watch this world from soft beds and glowing screens, marveling at how tough you were. If only they knew how much of your bravery is fueled by rice stew, and the simple hope that tomorrow you'll be a little stronger than today. Morning returns the way it always does here. Without asking your permission, light slides through the paper screens, pale and insistent, and the stable stirs like a single, enormous animal waking from sleep. You roll onto your side, joints protesting with tiny, sharp reminders of yesterday's drills. And for a second you wonder if this is what it feels like to be a door hinge that hasn't been oiled in a century. Then you remember where you are, and the thought settles. You are not here to be comfortable. You are here to be shaped. The hierarchy of the Heya reveals itself in 1,000 small, wordless ways. Where you sleep, where you sit, when you speak, even how loudly you breathe, it all follows an invisible map drawn by rank. The most senior wrestlers occupy the best spots. Closer to warmth in winter, closer to air in summer, and always closer to the food. You and the other juniors orbit them like small moons. Careful not to drift too close. Careful not to collide. You rise and immediately begin the morning chores. Fetching water from the well. Wiping down the training area. Laying out towels. None of this is written on a wall. Yet everyone knows exactly what to do. It's like stepping into a play where the script has been memorized by generations before you. And now it's your turn to recite it with your body. A senior passes by, and you bow automatically. The motion so ingrained already that it feels less like a decision and more like a reflex. Like blinking. In Edo, Japan, sumo stables were strict micro-societies. The system of seniority governed everything, echoing the wider social order of the Tokugawa era, where samurai stood above farmers, artisans, and merchants, and everyone knew their place. Inside the Heya, rank replaced class. A young man from a powerful family, if he was new, still scrubbed floors for a wrestler of humbler birth who had simply been there longer. It was a world where time and achievement, not lineage, determined status. A commonly known historical feature of this period is that the Tokugawa shogunate prized order and stability above all else. That same philosophy seeped into sumo. The stable was designed to produce disciplined bodies and disciplined minds. What is less widely known is that some Heya kept detailed ledgers not only of training and bouts, but of behavior. Small acts of disobedience, speaking out of turn, moving too slowly, showing insufficient spirit, could be recorded and remembered. It's a little like having your performance reviews carved into wood instead of typed into a computer. As you carry a bucket of water across the yard, arms trembling slightly, you notice how the seniors move through space. They do not rush. Others step aside for them. The way crowds part for a slow-moving but very large ship. One of them, a towering man with a topknot that looks like it could anchor a boat, pauses and asks for tea. The request is calm, almost gentle, but you feel the urgency in it anyway. You hurry to comply, heart beating faster than the water sloshing in the bucket. This is how respect works here. Not loud, not dramatic, but constant and heavy, like the weight you are slowly learning to carry. You set the tea down, bow again, and retreat. Your reward is not praise, but the absence of correction. In this place, silence is often the closest thing to approval. Training begins, and the hierarchy becomes physical. Seniors choose partners, juniors wait. When it's finally your turn, you face someone who has been doing this for years longer than you. He lowers his stance, eyes steady, and for a moment you feel like you're about to run into a wall that has opinions. The clash comes, and you are driven back, feet skidding on the packed earth. It's not cruel, exactly, but it is unmistakably instructional. You are being shown, in the clearest possible way, where you stand. A famous historical aspect of sumo is the ranking system that culminates in the exalted title of yokozuna, the grand champion. Even in the Edo period, the idea of climbing through ranks captured the public imagination. But within the stable, Rank was not just a line on a tournament board, it was a daily reality. Who could sit on a cushion instead of the floor? Who could wear better cloth? Who could give orders instead of receiving them? All of this flowed from your position on that invisible ladder. There's a strange, almost comforting logic to it. You know exactly what is expected of you. And you know exactly what you are not yet allowed to expect from others. In a modern world full of blurred lines and endless choices, this clarity might even feel relaxing. Here, the rules are heavy, but they are clear, and that has its own kind of peace. During a short break, you kneel near the edge of the yard, catching your breath. One of the older wrestlers tells a story about a legendary figure from decades past. A man who rose from obscurity to great rank through sheer endurance and obedience. The tale is part history, part cautionary lesson. Work hard, know your place, and time will either reward you or wear you down. No one is quite sure which. And that uncertainty hangs in the air like steam from the bath. A lesser-known fact surfaces in the conversation. In some Edo stables, juniors were forbidden from using certain words, particularly those that implied equality or casual familiarity with seniors. Language itself was ranked. You listen carefully, adjusting your own speech, realizing that even your vocabulary is being shaped along with your body. Historians still debate how much this linguistic control was about maintaining order and how much it reflected broader Confucian ideals of hierarchy and proper conduct. The day moves on in its steady rhythm of exertion and service. By evening, your legs feel thick and incooperative, like they've decided to take on the personality of stubborn tree trunks. You lower yourself onto your mat, exhausted but oddly satisfied. You think about how, in this world, becoming strong is not just about lifting and pushing, but about learning when to bow, when to wait, and when to endure without complaint. As the stable quiets, you realize that the hierarchy is not merely something imposed from above. It is something you are slowly, almost unconsciously, accepting. Each bow, each chore, each silent acknowledgement of your place is weaving you into a system that has existed long before you and will continue long after. And in that vast, orderly structure, you are a small but growing part, learning to stand, to fall, and, someday, perhaps, to command the space that now commands you. The cold of early morning bites a little deeper today, slipping through the thin cotton of your robe and settling into your bones like it intends to stay for a long visit. You step into the training yard before the sun has properly decided to show itself. And the ground feels stiff, almost resentful, under your bare feet. Breath clouds the air, each exhale a small, pale ghost drifting away. Around you, the other wrestlers move in silence, their shapes half lost in mist, like statues that have decided to stretch. Before any real training begins, there are rituals, not the grand, public ones with drums and cheering crowds, but the quieter, more intimate routines that belong only to the stable and the dawn. You watch a senior rikishi approach the small shrine at the edge of the yard. He bows, claps his hands, and murmurs a prayer. You follow, a little unsure of the exact rhythm, but careful to mirror his movements. The wood of the shrine is dark with age, polished by countless hands, and you feel a strange comfort in touching something that so many before you have touched for the same reason: hope, protection, a plea for strength. Sumo in the Edo period is inseparable from Shinto. This is a well-known historical truth. The ring is sacred, the ceremonies echo ancient agricultural rites, and the wrestlers themselves are. In a way, offerings of strength and vitality. What is less commonly talked about is how deeply this spirituality seeps into the daily routine. Long before any audience arrives, even stretching is done with a kind of solemn focus, as if your muscles themselves are being asked to cooperate with the divine. You drop into a deep squat, feeling your hips open, your thighs protest, and your balance wobble just slightly. The senior beside you corrects your posture with a gentle push to your back. No words, just pressure, and you adjust. The air is cold enough that your skin prickles, but your body is already warming. A slow furnace coming to life. Shika begins. The heavy leg lifts and stomps that look simple until you try to do them for minutes on end. Each time your foot comes down, the earth answers with a dull thud, like a drum beaten very slowly and very seriously. A famous historical detail is that these stomps were believed to drive away evil spirits from the ring. The sound, the vibration, the sheer force were meant to cleanse the space. There is something satisfying about that idea, even if, in a modern sense, it also feels like an extremely intense way to do leg day. Somewhere between the sacred and the practical, your thighs are on fire, and you are not sure whether you are exercising demons or just begging your muscles not to give up. Between exercises, you and the others sprinkle salt on the ground. Small white crystals scattering like snow. Salt is purification, protection, and tradition all at once. You have seen it thrown in great arcs before matches. But here, in the quiet morning, the gesture feels more personal. Historians still debate how much of these practices were rooted in genuine belief and how much evolved into symbolic performance over time. Standing here, breathing hard, you decide it doesn't really matter. Belief or habit, the effect is the same. It centers you, focuses you, and marks this space as different from the ordinary world. There is a curious, lesser-known superstition you overheard once. Some wrestlers believed that the direction of the wind during morning prayers could hint at the outcome of future bouts. A breeze from the east meant strength. From the west meant caution. Today, the air is almost still, and someone jokes softly that even the wind is holding its breath to see how you'll do. It's a small, dry remark, but it makes you smile. Even in a life built on discipline, people find room for gentle humor, like cracks of light in a wooden wall. Stretching continues, long and slow. You reach, twist, fold, feeling tendons lengthen and joints loosen. The pain is not sharp now, but deep and warm, like a reminder that your body is both a tool and a temple. You think about how, in the wider Edo world, temples and shrines are everywhere, anchoring neighborhoods and marking the rhythm of festivals and seasons. Here, your own body is treated with a similar mix of reverence and use. It must be cared for, but it must also be tested. Again and again. A senior tells a brief story as you rest between sets, about a famous wrestler who once ignored the morning rituals and went on to lose badly that very day. Whether the story is true or just a convenient lesson is unclear. Historians still argue about how much these anecdotes were factual and how much they were crafted to reinforce discipline and respect for tradition. Either way, the message is clear. You do not skip the small things. In a life where victory can be decided by inches and moments, every gesture, every habit, every quiet prayer counts. As the sun finally crests the rooftops, light spills into the yard, catching on sweat and turning it into tiny points of gold. You straighten up, chest rising and falling, and for a moment, The world feels perfectly balanced between effort and stillness. The rituals are done. The body is warmed. The mind is, if not calm, at least focused. You realize that these mornings are slowly teaching you something beyond strength. They are teaching patience, repetition, and a kind of moving meditation. Each bow, each stomp, each stretch is a thread, and together they are weaving you into a pattern that has existed for centuries. You are no longer just a boy who was recruited from a village. You are becoming part of a living tradition. One that begins every day in silence, breath, and the steady, grounding rhythm of feet meeting earth. By the time the real training begins, the cold has retreated, chased away by heat rising from bodies and breath. The yard no longer feels like a quiet shrine, it feels like a forge. Sweat beads on your skin almost immediately, gathering at your temples, sliding down your spine, soaking into the cloth until it clings to you like a second. Heavier layer, the air thickens, not just with moisture, but with the low, animal sounds of effort, grunts, sharp exhales, the dull percussion of flesh meeting flesh. This is the part of the day everyone talks about. The brutal heart of sumo life. You line up for Butsukari Gaiko, the pushing drill that looks simple in theory and feels like running headfirst into a moving wall in practice. A senior stands in front of you, feet planted, center of gravity low, expression unreadable. You charge, hands driving into his chest, and for a split second you think you might actually move him. Then he shifts his weight, almost lazily, and you are the one sliding back, legs scrambling, balance wobbling like a shopping cart with one bad wheel. You reset and do it again, and again, and again. Each impact sends a shock through your shoulders and into your ribs. A deep, resonant thud that feels like it's echoing inside your chest. This is how power is built here. Not with neat repetitions and rest intervals, but with relentless collision. In Edo Japan, physical toughness was not an abstract ideal, it was a necessity. Celebrated in warriors, laborers, and, of course, wrestlers. Sumo training borrowed that same philosophy. The body must be hardened through contact, like steel through hammering. A widely known historical truth is that Edo-period training was far harsher than what most people would recognize today. There were no soft mats, no protective gear, and very little concern for what we would now call long-term joint health. What is less commonly mentioned is that some stables believed pain itself was a teacher. A kind of language. If your body hurt, it was speaking, telling you where you were weak, where you needed to focus. Historians still debate whether this belief came from practical experience or from a cultural tendency to romanticize endurance. Between drills, you drop to one knee, chest heaving, and for a moment the world narrows to the rhythm of your own breathing. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. It's almost hypnotic. Like the slow rise and fall of waves. A senior walks past and taps your thigh with his foot. A silent signal to stand up. Rest is brief here, more of a pause than a break. Like the comma in a very long, very demanding sentence. Next comes sparring. You face another junior, someone close to your own level. And the mood shifts slightly. There is still hierarchy. Still respect, but now there is also competition. You crouch, hands open, eyes fixed on his chest. The start is explosive. You clash, bodies locking, each of you trying to find leverage, to feel that tiny shift in balance that means opportunity. Your muscles strain, tendons taut, and you can hear your own heartbeat in your ears. Loud and insistent. like a drum that's forgotten how to be quiet. You manage to push him back a step. It's a small victory, but it sends a spark of pride through you. Then he adjusts, hooks your arm, and suddenly you're the one stumbling, catching yourself just in time to avoid kissing the dirt. Someone chuckles softly from the side, not unkindly, more like the sound you make when you watch a toddler take a wobbly step and nearly fall. You straighten, bow, and reset. Even in defeat, etiquette holds everything together. A famous historical element of sumo is that matches could be decided in seconds. Sometimes in a single, perfectly timed shove or throw. Training reflects that reality. Explosiveness matters. Reaction time matters. You learn to read tiny cues, the shift of a shoulder, the tension in a forearm, the way weight settles into the heels. It's like learning a new language, one spoken entirely through bodies. There is also a strange, lesser-known practice you experience today. After a particularly intense round, a senior instructs you to hold a low stance for an uncomfortably long time. Thighs burning, sweat dripping from your nose onto the ground. He tells you to focus on your breathing and your gaze, not on the pain. This, he says, builds not just strength, but spirit. Some stables believed that the ability to remain calm under physical distress was what separated future champions from those who would plateau. Historians still debate how much this emphasis on spirit training was psychological conditioning and how much it was simply a way to push bodies beyond what they thought possible. As the session drags on, fatigue wraps around you like a heavy cloak. Your movements slow, just a fraction, and you feel it immediately. The ground seems farther away when you drop into a stance. The air feels thicker when you try to draw it in. And yet, there is also a strange clarity. Your mind stops wandering. There is only the next breath, the next step, the next impact. At one point, you misjudge a charge and take a shoulder square to the chest. The force knocks the air from your lungs in a sharp, silent rush. For a heartbeat, the world tilts. Then you're back, inhaling, coughing once, and forcing yourself upright. A senior watches closely, not rushing to help, but ready if you truly fall. When you steady yourself, he gives a single nod. It's small, but it feels like a medal. In Edo, stories of wrestlers who endured incredible punishment in training were passed around almost like legends. Men who practiced with broken toes, cracked ribs, fevers that would keep others in bed. Whether all of those stories are true is uncertain. Historians still argue about how much has been exaggerated by time and pride. But standing here, chest aching, muscles trembling, you understand how such tales could be born. Pain, when shared and survived, becomes narrative. Finally, the session winds down, not with a dramatic signal, but with a gradual easing. Like a storm that runs out of rain, you bow to your partners, to the seniors, to the space itself. Your body feels used, in the most literal sense of the word. And yet there is a deep, quiet satisfaction beneath the soreness. You are learning what your limits feel like. And, slowly, how to step just beyond them. As you walk off the training ground, legs heavy, sweat cooling on your skin, you think about how strange this life would look to someone outside. To choose, day after day, to run into other people as hard as you can, to celebrate the bruises, to measure progress in how much more you can endure than yesterday. It's almost comical, in a way, like a very serious game of human bumper cars with sacred rules and spiritual overtones. And yet, beneath the humor, There is something undeniably powerful in this relentless practice. You are being carved, shaped by impact and repetition, like stones smoothed by a river. Each clash, each stumble, each moment of burning muscle is another small step away from the boy who arrived at the gate and another step toward the wrestler you are meant to become. Hunger returns the way the tide does, inevitable, rhythmic, and impossible to ignore. After the brutality of training, your body feels like an empty furnace, still hot but desperately in need of fuel. The smell from the kitchen drifts across the yard, rich and savory, wrapping around you like a promise. It's Chankanabe again, the great equalizer and great builder. The stew that has probably done as much to shape sumo history as any legendary bout. You file in with the other juniors. Bowls ready, eyes down. The seniors sit first, as always, and you watch the way they eat, unhurried, methodical, as if each mouthful is part of a long-term plan rather than a moment of pleasure. In Edo, Japan, this meal is more than food. It is strategy. Protein, fat, and calories are stacked layer upon layer, turning effort into mass into power. Long before modern sports nutrition existed, sumo stables were already running what is essentially a highly controlled bulking program, just without the spreadsheets and Instagram posts. A well-known historical fact is that chankanabe became synonymous with sumo, so much so that the dish eventually spread beyond stables and into ordinary restaurants. But here's a lesser-known detail. In some Edo-era heiau, the exact recipe was treated almost like a secret technique. Different combinations of fish, meat, vegetables, and broth were believed to produce different qualities of strength. Some stews were thought to build explosive power, others endurance. It sounds a bit like medieval alchemy, but when you're eating your third bowl and still feel like you could go for a fourth, you begin to understand why people invested the food with almost mystical importance. You lift your chopsticks and dig in. The warmth spreads from your stomach outward, a slow, comforting wave that eases the tightness in your muscles. There is something deeply satisfying about this moment, like the quiet after a storm. Around you, the room is filled with the soft sounds of eating. Chopsticks tapping bowls, low murmurs, the occasional clink of ceramic. It's one of the few times in the day when the atmosphere relaxes. Just a fraction. One senior tells a story between bites about a famous Edo-period wrestler who was said to eat enough in one sitting to feed an entire family. The crowd in the tale gasped. The stable master nodded approvingly, and the wrestler went on to dominate his division. Whether the numbers are exaggerated or not, the message is clear. Appetite is part of the job. You joke silently that in another life, this would be the only profession where being told to eat more is considered serious career advice. After the main course comes rice. More rice than you ever thought a human being should consume in one meal. You feel your stomach stretch, not uncomfortably, but noticeably, like a balloon being filled slowly and carefully. The seniors rise first, signaling the end, and you and the other juniors begin clearing bowls, wiping tables, restoring order, even in abundance. Discipline rules. A strange, little-known custom surfaces as you work. Some stables believed that the last drops of broth in the pot carried the combined spirit of everyone who had eaten from it. Juniors were sometimes encouraged to drink that final, concentrated portion as a kind of communal bond. Whether this was sincere belief or just a poetic way of making sure nothing went to waste is unclear. Historians still debate how much symbolism was layered onto what were, at their core, very practical habits in a world where food security was never guaranteed. With your chores done, you finally have a moment to sit back against the wall, feeling the heavy, pleasant fullness settle in. The fatigue from training mixes with the warmth of the meal, creating a drowsy calm. Your body is busy turning stew into strength, rice into mass, tomorrow's effort into something already quietly under construction. In the wider Edo world, famine was not an abstract memory but a recurring fear. Bad harvests, floods, or political disruptions could mean real hunger for common people. Inside the stable, the steady supply of food was both a privilege and a responsibility. You were being fed so that you could represent the stable, the sport, and in a small way, the order of the society itself. Eating was not indulgence, it was duty. As you close your eyes for a brief rest, you become aware of how central this simple act is to everything else. Without these meals, the rituals would be hollow, the training impossible, the dreams of rank and recognition nothing more than thin air. In this world, food is not just sustenance, it is the quiet engine of ambition. The soft, steaming foundation upon which all the stomping, pushing, and striving is built. The afternoon settles into your bones like a slow ache. The kind that doesn't shout but never quite leaves. Training is over. The bowls are washed. The yard is quiet again. And yet your body keeps replaying the day in small, insistent reminders. A shoulder twinges when you shift. A knee complains when you stand. Your lower back hums with a dull, steady throb, like a distant drum that refuses to stop beating. This is the part of sumo life no one in the cheering crowd really sees. The long conversation between flesh and pain that continues long after the clapping has faded. You help prepare the bath, hauling buckets of hot water, steam rising and fogging the air until the room feels like a cloud you can walk into. Seniors will bathe first, sinking into the heat, letting their massive bodies relax for a brief, precious while. You and the other juniors wait, sitting quietly, towels folded on your laps, pretending not to notice how much you'd like to be in that water right now. When it's finally your turn, the heat wraps around you like a blanket, and your muscles loosen with soft, grateful sighs you didn't know they could make. In Edo Japan, public bathhouses were common, and cleanliness was culturally important. But for sumo wrestlers, bathing carried another meaning. It was one of the few moments when the body could recover. When stiffness softened and bruises felt less sharp. A well-known historical practice was that wrestlers often treated minor injuries with hot water and herbal compresses. Long before modern sports medicine existed, what is less widely known is that some stables had specific bath rituals for injured wrestlers. Believing that certain temperatures or soaking times could draw out bad spirits thought to be causing the pain. You examine your own body in the steam, faint purple marks blooming on your arms and chest, souvenirs from the morning's collisions. None of them are serious. Not yet, but they are a preview. In this life, injury is not an exception, it is an expectation. Sprained ankles, strained backs, cracked ribs, swollen joints. These are the quiet companions of every rikishi. The unspoken rule is simple: you endure. And you do so quietly. There is an old story whispered among the juniors about a famous Edo-period wrestler who continued to compete with a broken toe. Wrapping it tightly and saying nothing. The tale is meant to inspire. But it also carries a warning. Pain, if ignored too long, can become something permanent. Historians still debate how common such extreme cases truly were, and how much the culture of silence around injury may have shortened careers that might otherwise have lasted longer. After the bath, you sit while a senior applies a simple herbal paste to a swollen spot on your shoulder. The smell is sharp and earthy, a mix of roots and leaves. He presses it in with firm fingers, not unkindly, and tells you to keep it on overnight. There is no dramatic speech about recovery, no gentle encouragement, just practical care, passed down the way everything else is here, through example, repetition, and quiet authority. You realize that learning when to endure and when to tend to yourself is part of your education. Too much toughness, and you break. Too much caution, and you fall behind. Walking that line is an art, as subtle as balance in the ring. In the larger world of Edo, warriors faced a similar dilemma, pushing their bodies in training and battle while knowing that a single untreated wound could end everything. Sumo, though ceremonial, carries echoes of that same mentality. As evening deepens, the stable grows still. Lamps cast soft pools of light on wooden floors, and shadows stretch lazily along the walls. You lie back on your mat, the faint scent of herbs mixing with the ever-present smell of rice and sweat. Your body is tired in a way that feels earned, like the satisfying exhaustion after a long journey, even though you have barely begun. Somewhere outside, Edo continues its restless life, merchants closing shops, lanterns swaying, voices fading into night. Inside, you focus on your breathing, slow and even, letting the warmth from the bath and the fullness from the meal lull you toward sleep. The aches are still there, but they are quieter now, like voices lowered out of respect for the approaching night. You understand, in this calm moment, that pain will be a constant companion on your path. It will come and go, change shape, settle in different places, but it will always be part of the story. And yet, there is a strange reassurance in that. If you hurt, it means you are training. If you are training, it means you are moving forward. With that thought, you let your eyes close. The stable breathes around you, a low, collective rhythm, and you drift, knowing that tomorrow the cycle will begin again. Ritual, collision, hunger, recovery, each turn of it shaping you, quietly and relentlessly, into something stronger than you were the day before. The first tournament arrives not with thunder, but with a nervous kind of silence inside you, the sort that hums just beneath the skin. Dawn breaks, and everything feels sharper than usual, the light, the sounds, even the way your own breath moves in and out. Today is your first basho, your first official appearance before the public eye, and the stable seems to carry that weight with you. Movements are more deliberate, voices are lower, even the air feels like it's waiting. You dress carefully, tying your mawashi with hands that are steady only because you force them to be. The fabric is thick, rough, and smells faintly of salt and past sweat, like it remembers every bout it has ever witnessed. A senior checks the knot, gives a small nod, and says nothing more. In this world, approval is often silent, and silence can be louder than applause. The journey to the tournament grounds is short, but it feels long. As you walk, you hear Edo waking up around you, the clatter of shutters opening, the calls of vendors, the distant rumble of carts. Sumo days draw crowds the way storms draw attention. People drift toward the arena, some in fine robes, others in patched clothing, all carrying the same curiosity and excitement. For them, this is entertainment, tradition, and a chance to cheer. For you, It is the moment when all those quiet mornings, aching muscles, and endless bowls of stew are put to the test. A well-known historical fact is that Edo-period tournaments were major public events, often held in temple precincts and attended by every class of society. The ring was both sacred space and stage. What fewer people realize is that for lower-ranked wrestlers, the noise could be overwhelming. Imagine stepping from a silent training yard into a sea of voices, laughter, and expectation, like walking from a library straight into a festival. Backstage, you wait with the other juniors, kneeling, eyes forward. The smell of incense mixes with the earthy scent of the doyo, freshly prepared and sprinkled with salt. You watch the senior wrestlers perform their ring-entering ceremonies. Their movements slow, dignified, almost regal. The crowd murmurs in appreciation. These men look like they belong to another world, one made of ritual and confidence. You wonder, briefly, if you will ever move with that kind of ease. Your name is called, not shouted, just announced, but it lands in your chest like a drumbeat. You rise, step forward, and bow. The world seems to narrow to the clay circle ahead of you. As you climb onto the ring, you feel the texture under your feet, cool and slightly rough, grounding and unreal at the same time. This is the place you've cleaned, stomped, and trained on, but now it feels different, charged, alive. Your opponent is another young wrestler, eyes bright with the same mix of fear and determination you feel. You crouch, fingertips brushing the clay, and for a heartbeat everything goes quiet inside your head. The signal is given, you launch forward. The clash is sudden and total. The sound of impact ripples through the ring and into the crowd. A collective intake of breath. You push, he resists, and the two of you lock together. Muscles straining, feet digging in, training takes over. You remember your stance, your balance, the way to feel for weakness rather than force it. For a moment, you think you have him. Then he shifts, and the world tilts. You stumble, recover, and somehow stay inside the ring. The crowd reacts with a wave of sound, and that noise fuels you. Sharp and electric, you drive forward again, channeling everything you have into one last effort. This time, his footing slips. It's only an inch, but in sumo, inches are destiny. He goes down, and you remain standing. It's over. The realization comes slowly, like the end of a long exhale. You bow, heart hammering, ears ringing, and step back. The referee's gesture confirms it. You have won your first official bout. Not a legendary victory, not one that will be sung about for generations, but yours, a beginning. A famous historical pattern in Edo tournaments is that many future champions started exactly like this. With small, almost unnoticed wins in the lower divisions. The crowd might not remember their names yet, but the path had begun. A lesser-known detail is that some stables kept careful records of these first matches, treating them as omens. A clean win was seen as a sign of good fortune. A messy one suggested a longer, harder road ahead. Historians still debate how seriously such signs were taken. But within the stables, they were often whispered about with great interest. As you leave the ring, your legs feel strangely light, as if the ground itself is offering you a little forgiveness after all the punishment you've given it. A senior meets your eyes and gives a small, approving nod. No smile, no praise, just acknowledgement. It means more than you expected. Later, as you sit and watch other bouts, the scale of the world you've entered becomes clearer. The power, the skill, the drama, All of it unfolds in that clay circle. You realize that today was not just about winning or losing. It was about stepping into the story, becoming a visible part of something that Edo has loved for generations. And as the sun dips and the crowd slowly disperses, you carry with you a quiet, steady feeling. You belong here now. Not at the top, not even close, but on the path, the long, demanding, often painful path that begins with a single bout and stretches forward into a future you are only just starting to imagine. The noise of the tournament grounds lingers in your ears long after you have stepped away from the ring, like the afterimage of a bright light when you close your eyes. Vendors shout, children laugh, men argue about techniques and outcomes with the confidence of people who have never had to step onto the clay themselves. You sit with the other lower-ranked wrestlers at the edge of the arena, watching, listening, absorbing. This is what sumo looks like to the world. Color, ceremony, and controlled violence, all wrapped in tradition and spectacle. From here, you can see how carefully everything is arranged. The banners fluttering in the breeze, the priests overseeing the rituals, the referees in their ornate robes that make them look like they've stepped out of a painting. Edo loves order, and it loves display, and sumo offers both in generous measure. A well-known historical fact is that these tournaments were often organized under the patronage of temples and, indirectly, the shogunate, making them not just sporting events but public affirmations of social stability and divine favor. Yet beneath the elegance, there is a constant undercurrent of raw effort. You watch a bout between two higher-ranked wrestlers, and the impact is so loud you feel it in your chest. The crowd roars, some in delight, some in shock, and you realize how deeply invested these people are. For them, each match is a story, a clash of personalities and reputations, a chance to witness strength in its most visible form. It's a little like modern fans watching a championship game, except the players are nearly naked and the rules are centuries old. You notice something else, too. How the wrestlers carry themselves outside the ring. The senior rikishi walks slowly, deliberately, as if aware that every movement is being observed. Their top knots are perfectly arranged, their robes immaculate. This public image is part of the profession. In Edo society, sumo wrestlers were celebrities, and with that came expectations of dignity and composure. What is less commonly discussed is how much effort went into maintaining that image. Even when bodies were sore and tempers frayed, the calm you see is, in many cases, carefully practiced. As the day wears on, the sun climbs higher, and the clay of the doyo begins to dry and crack slightly at the edges. Attendants smooth it, sprinkle more salt, restore its pristine surface before each important bout. The ring must look perfect, because it represents something larger than the individuals who step into it. It is, in a sense, a stage where the ideals of strength, balance, and respect are constantly being reenacted. A strange, lesser-known detail catches your attention. Before some matches, wrestlers subtly touch the ground and then their own bodies, as if testing the connection between themselves and the ring. Some believed this helped them listen to the surface, to feel its firmness and adjust their stance accordingly. Others thought it was a quiet gesture of respect, acknowledging the sacredness of the space. Historians still debate whether this was superstition, practical habit, or a blend of both. You think back to your own bout earlier. How the clay felt under your toes. How the boundary of the ring suddenly became the most important line in the world. Crossing it meant defeat, staying within it meant survival. At least for that moment. It's a simple rule, but one that carries immense weight, both literally and figuratively. As you watch a particularly dramatic match end in a flurry of movement and dust, the crowd erupts. You feel the energy roll over you like a wave. This, you realize, is why sumo holds such power in Edo. It is immediate and ancient at the same time, a living reminder of strength, ritual, and the thin line between control and chaos. When the day finally begins to wind down, and the shadows lengthen across the grounds, you rise with the others to return to the stable. Your body is tired, but your mind is wide awake, replaying images, the ring, the crowd, the clash, the moment of balance before everything tipped one way or the other. You understand now that sumo is not just what happens in training, or even what happens in the ring. It is also what happens in the watching, the collective breath held by thousands of people who see in these bouts something of their own struggles and hopes. As you walk back through the streets of Edo, the sounds of the tournament fading behind you, you carry that realization quietly. You are part of a public story now, however small your role may be. And in this world where ritual and reality intertwine, even the smallest role is woven into something vast, something that echoes long after the clay has been smoothed and the banners have been taken down. Back in the stable, the memory of the ring lingers like the echo of a drumbeat. Even when the clay is far behind you, even when your feet are back on familiar wooden floors, part of your mind is still standing on that sacred circle, feeling its cool firmness, measuring its invisible boundaries. The dojo is not just a place, it is a rule made physical. Step outside, and you lose. Stay centered, and you live to push again. The next morning, training returns you to its quiet, relentless rhythm, but now, everything feels slightly different. When you crouch, when you plant your feet, when you lift your leg for shika, you imagine the ring beneath you, not the yard. Your body begins to understand space in a new way. The dojo is small, brutally small, and every inch of it matters. Balance is no longer an abstract concept. It is the thin line between standing and falling in front of hundreds of eyes. A well-known historical truth is that sumo's rules have remained remarkably consistent for centuries. Force your opponent out, or make any part of him other than his feet touch the ground. Simple, almost elegant, yet inside that simplicity is endless complexity. Angles, timing, weight shifts, and the subtle art of reading another man's intention through the tension in his muscles. Edo-period masters spoke of listening with the body, feeling where the opponent's strength was flowing and where it hesitated. You practice suri-ashi, the sliding footwork that keeps you low and stable. Your soles skim the ground, never lifting fully, like they are afraid to lose contact with reality for even a heartbeat. A senior corrects you, nudging your hip, lowering your center. The ring is small, he murmurs, so your balance must be big. It's the kind of sentence that sounds wise and confusing at the same time. Like something you'd see on a scroll and pretend to understand. In Edo Japan, the dojo itself was considered a sacred construction. Before major tournaments, priests performed purification rites, burying offerings, rice, chestnuts, sometimes coins, beneath its center to appease the gods. This is a famous historical practice. What fewer people know is that some wrestlers believed the ring had its own moods, changing with weather, humidity, even the emotional energy of the crowd. A soft surface could favor one style, a dry, hard one another. Historians still debate how much of this was true and how much was the human tendency to find meaning in variables we cannot fully control. You remember how the clay felt during your first bout. Slightly cool, slightly gritty, gripping your skin. Now, during training, you try to recreate that sensation in your mind, letting it guide your stance. You learn to feel the edge of the ring without looking, to sense where safety ends and danger begins. It's like learning to walk near a cliff in the dark, trusting your body to know when to stop. There is a moment when you are pushed close to the boundary during a drill. Your heel hovers just above where the rope would be. Instinct flares, and you twist, shifting your weight, staying in. The senior nods. It's a small thing, but it feels like a door opening. You are beginning to understand the geometry of survival. Between exercises, someone tells a story of an Edo wrestler who was famous for winning matches by the narrowest margins. His toes sometimes brushing the straw bales that marked the ring's edge. The crowd would gasp, certain he was out, only for him to pivot and send his opponent flying. These tales became legend, proof that awareness and balance could overcome even great size. Whether every detail is true is uncertain. Historians still argue about how much of such stories were embellished to heighten drama. But their lesson remains. The ring rewards those who know it intimately. As the day wears on, your legs tremble with fatigue, yet your mind stays sharp. You start to feel the difference between pushing blindly and pushing with direction. Between resisting and redirecting, the doyo is teaching you. Even when you are not standing on it, it teaches you about limits, about pressure, about how close you can come to losing before you find a way not to. When you finally rest, sitting against the wall, breathing slow and deep, you picture that circle of clay again. In the vast, crowded world of Edo, it is a small island of meaning. Everything inside it is reduced to essentials: balance, force, timing, will. Everything outside it, rank, noise, expectation, fades for a few heartbeats. And you realize that learning the ring is learning yourself. Where you are strong, where you wobble, where you panic, and where you remain calm. The doyo does not lie. It reflects exactly what you bring into it. And now, slowly, patiently, it is beginning to recognize you in return. With each passing week, your body changes in ways that are both obvious and subtle. Obvious in the way your robes fit tighter around shoulders and thighs. In the new weight that settles into your steps, making the floor creak just a little more when you walk. Subtle in the way your posture shifts. Spine more upright, chin more level, as if confidence is quietly adding its own invisible mass. Rank begins to matter more now. Not just as an abstract ladder, but as something that shapes your daily comforts and small privileges. You notice that a senior is allowed to sleep a little farther from the draft in winter. That his towel is always placed first. That his bowl is filled without him having to ask. These are tiny things, but in a life built on repetition, tiny things become markers of status, like stars sewn onto a uniform. In Edo Japan, hierarchy was the backbone of society. Samurai, farmers, artisans, merchants, each class had its place, its duties, its expectations. Inside the sumo stable, that same structure existed in miniature. A well-known historical reality is that only higher-ranked wrestlers were allowed certain luxuries: better clothing, personal attendants, sometimes even the right to grow their hair in more elaborate styles. These outward signs told the world, and everyone within it, exactly where a man stood. What is less commonly mentioned is how motivating these privileges could be. They were not grand rewards, not castles or titles, but they were tangible proof that effort could change your daily life. A softer mat, a warmer spot, being served instead of serving. In a world where so much is fixed by birth, this small mobility carries enormous weight. Historians still debate how much the stable system offered true social movement and how much it simply reshuffled status within a very narrow circle. But to someone like you, the difference feels real enough. During training, a senior allows you to join a slightly more advanced drill. It is not announced, you are simply waved over. The exercise is faster, more demanding, and the pace leaves you gasping. But the unspoken message is clear. You are being tested at a higher level. Your muscles burn, your breath comes in short, sharp pulls, and yet there is a quiet thrill beneath the strain. You are no longer just enduring, you are being evaluated. Later, as you help fold robes and tidy the sleeping area, you overhear talk of an upcoming ranking announcement. Names will be read, positions adjusted. For some, it will mean promotion, a step closer to comfort and recognition. For others, it will mean stagnation, or even a fall. The thought makes your stomach tighten. And not from hunger this time. You think of your first tournament win, of the small nod of approval, and wonder if it is enough to move you even one rung upward. A curious, lesser-known detail about Edo-period sumo is that rank could influence not only your life in the stable but also how you were treated outside. Merchants might offer discounts, innkeepers better rooms, simply because your position in the rankings carried a certain prestige. It was an early form of celebrity privilege. Subtle but real, historians still argue about how widespread this was. But accounts from the period suggest that even minor status could open doors. As evening falls, you sit quietly, legs stretched, feeling the steady ache that now feels almost familiar. You imagine what it would be like to be one of the seniors. To move through the stable without having to hurry, without having to lower your gaze so often. The image is both comforting and distant, like thinking about a mountain you can see but have not yet climbed. For now, you are still learning, still serving, still pushing your body and patience in equal measure. But the latter is no longer just an idea. It has shape, rungs, and the faint promise that if you keep climbing, if you endure the heat, the hunger, the collisions, the quiet discipline, your place on it will slowly, almost imperceptibly, begin to rise. Rivalries begin the way small cracks do in ice, quietly, almost invisibly, until one day you realize they have been there all along. Spreading. At first, every other junior is simply another body to train with, another face in the line, another set of shoulders to crash into. But time and repetition have a way of sharpening edges. You start to notice patterns. Who pushes a little harder when you pair up? Who avoids your eyes? Who seems to measure you the way a merchant measures cloth, already calculating how much strength you might be worth? There is one wrestler, close to your age and rank, who always seems to end up opposite you during drills. His build is different from yours, slightly shorter, denser, like a block of carved stone. Where your power comes from forward drive, his comes from stability, an ability to absorb force and give it back with interest. When you clash, the impact feels different, more stubborn, like trying to move a rooted tree instead of a rolling boulder. In Edo-period sumo, rivalries were not just personal, they were narrative. The public loved them, A well-known historical pattern is that tournaments were often promoted around recurring matchups. The same two men meeting again and again. Their styles contrasting. Their records slowly weaving a story the crowd could follow. Even in the lower divisions, stables paid attention to these dynamics, quietly tracking who seemed to bring out the best, or the worst, in each other. What is less often discussed is how these rivalries formed long before the banners and the cheering. They began here, in the stable, in the sweat and dust of daily training. You feel it now when you square off with this particular junior. The air seems to tighten. Your focus narrowing. You both crouch a little lower. Push a little harder. Refuse to give ground even when your legs are shaking. One afternoon, during a particularly intense sparring session, you lock together near the edge of the practice ring. Your feet slide, his grip tightens, and for a moment you are balanced on the thin line between staying in and stepping out. You remember the lessons of the dojo, the awareness of boundaries, and you twist, shifting your weight just enough. He stumbles, catches himself, and the drill ends. No one says anything, but the looks exchanged are sharp, acknowledging something has been established. There is a strange mix of respect and competition in it. You do not hate him. In fact, you understand him more clearly than many of the others. His strengths highlight your weaknesses, and yours expose his. It is like looking into a slightly distorted mirror. In a life ruled by hierarchy, having a true rival, someone neither far above nor far below you, gives your efforts a new kind of focus. A lesser-known belief in some Edo stables was that rivals were paired by fate. That certain temperaments and body types were destined to clash repeatedly. Some even consulted fortune-tellers, half in jest, half in hope, to predict which matchups would produce the most compelling struggles. Historians still debate how seriously such practices were taken. But the language of destiny and opposition certainly colored the way people talked about these relationships. As days turn into weeks, you notice that when you train with him, you push yourself harder without being told. Your stance lowers, your reactions sharpen. Fatigue becomes something to negotiate with, not surrender to. In quiet moments, you wonder if he feels the same, if your presence spurs him on the way his spurs you. At night, lying on your mat, you replay your encounters in your mind, not obsessively, but with a steady, thoughtful attention. Where did he find that leverage? How did he shift his weight so smoothly? These questions are not just about him, they are about you. About what you need to become to meet him, and others like him, on equal terms. Rivalry, you are learning, is another kind of teacher. It strips away excuses. It gives your effort a face, a shape, a living challenge, and as you drift toward sleep, muscles heavy and warm, you realize that somewhere in the rhythm of pushing and resisting, a quiet promise has formed. You will meet him again, many times, in training and in the ring, and each meeting will carve both of you a little more sharply into the wrestlers you are becoming. Whispers begin to thread their way through the stable, soft as steam and just as persistent. They are stories of signs and omens, of small, easily missed details that are said to hint at future triumph or quiet disaster. In a world built on ritual and repetition, it feels natural that people would search for meaning in the spaces between effort and outcome. In the things that cannot be measured by strength alone. You hear about them while stretching, while eating, while waiting your turn for the bath. A senior mentions that the way a candle flickers during evening prayers can foretell the mood of the next day's training. Another claims that if a wrestler sneezes 3 times before stepping onto the ring, he should expect trouble. The tone is half serious, half amused, as if everyone knows these beliefs are a little fragile. Yet no one is willing to dismiss them entirely. In sumo, as in much of Edo life, superstition and practicality walk side by side, neither fully in charge. A well-known historical reality is that Shinto and folk beliefs were deeply woven into daily routines. People prayed to household gods, consulted charms, and observed seasonal signs with care. Sumo, being both sport and sacred performance, naturally absorbed this mindset. Before tournaments, offerings were made, salt was scattered, and certain days were considered more auspicious than others. These practices gave structure to uncertainty, a way to feel prepared when the outcome of a bout could hinge on a single misstep. There is also a lesser-known custom you witness one morning. A junior ties a small amulet inside his mawashi. Hidden from view, it is said to contain a fragment of paper inscribed with a protective prayer. He touches it briefly before training, not openly, but with a quick, private gesture. Whether it truly offers protection or simply confidence is impossible to say. Historians still debate how widespread such personal talismans were, and how much they influenced performance, but their presence in stables is noted in scattered accounts. Your own relationship with these beliefs is cautious. You do not mock them, but you do not cling to them either. Still, you find yourself paying attention. When the morning breeze is cool and steady, you feel a small, irrational comfort. When clouds gather unexpectedly, you feel a flicker of unease. Quickly dismissed, but not entirely forgotten. It's like knowing that a certain song is supposed to bring luck. You tell yourself it's nonsense. Yet you feel better when it plays. One day, during a break in training, an older wrestler tells the story of a famous Edo champion who refused to fight on a day marked as unlucky by the calendar. The bout was postponed, and when it finally took place, the champion won decisively. Was it fate, or simply a well-timed delay that allowed an injury to heal? No one knows for sure. Historians still argue about how much these calendar beliefs actually affected decisions and how much later storytellers shaped events to fit the narrative of destiny. As you listen, you realize that these superstitions serve another purpose. They create a shared language of hope and caution, a way to talk about fear without naming it directly. It is easier to say, "The wind was wrong today," than to admit, "I was afraid I would lose." In that sense, omens become a kind of emotional shorthand, allowing strong men to acknowledge uncertainty without breaking the calm, disciplined image expected of them. That evening, as you sit quietly after prayers, you notice the way the shadows fall across the floor, forming shapes that shift and blur. For a moment, one looks like a figure standing at the edge of the ring. You blink, and it is gone, just wood and lamplight again. You smile to yourself, aware of how easily the mind finds patterns when it is tired. Still, you bow a little deeper than usual, just in case. In the end, you return to what you know for certain: the feel of clay under your feet, the burn in your muscles, the steady rhythm of breath and effort. Superstitions may color the edges of your world, but the center is built on training, discipline, and the quiet will to stand your ground. And yet, as you lie down to sleep, you cannot help but wonder, just a little, what signs tomorrow might bring, and whether you will notice them when they appear. Travel arrives like a sudden widening of the world. One morning, you are told to prepare for a journey, and the stable that has felt like the center of everything becomes just one point on a long road. Belongings are packed with care. Robes folded. Sandals tied together. Small personal items tucked away. The seniors move with calm efficiency, clearly used to this rhythm, while you and the other juniors feel a mix of excitement and quiet anxiety. Leaving the familiar walls of the Heia feels a little like stepping off the edge of a map. The procession sets out at dawn. The city of Edo slowly unfolding around you. You pass narrow streets where shopkeepers lift shutters. Children chase each other between carts, and the smell of grilled fish mixes with that of wet earth. Beyond the city, the road opens, winding through fields and villages. Past rivers that glint in the morning light. You walk, carrying your weight and your thoughts, learning quickly that travel itself is a kind of training. Every step adds to the fatigue already stored in your legs. And yet there is something refreshing about the movement, about seeing how large the world is beyond the ring. In the Edo period, sumo tours, or jungyo, were common. Wrestlers traveled to different regions to perform, collect donations, and spread the prestige of their stables. This is a well-known historical practice, turning sumo into a truly national presence. What is less often discussed is how challenging these journeys could be. Roads were rough, accommodations basic, and weather unpredictable. For large-bodied men, long walks and cramped inns were not exactly comfortable. Historians still debate how much of this hardship was accepted as part of the discipline and how much was simply the unavoidable reality of pre-modern travel. At the first post town, you stay in an inn that smells of straw mats and smoke. The rooms are small, and you find yourself sharing space with other juniors, lying shoulder to shoulder, listening to the creak of the building as wind moves through it. Dinner is simple compared to the abundant meals of the stable, but still warm and filling. You eat quietly, aware that even here, far from home, the hierarchy travels with you. Seniors are served first, choose their spots, and set the tone. The order of things is portable. The next day, you arrive at a small town where a temporary ring has been prepared. Locals gather, curious and excited, forming a crowd that feels different from the one in Edo. Their faces are less familiar with the pageantry. Their reactions more open, sometimes more astonished. When the seniors perform, the children stare wide-eyed, and the adults murmur in appreciation. You realize that for many of them, this may be the first time they have seen sumo up close. Not just heard about it in stories. You watch from the side as bouts are held. The clay circle set against a backdrop of wooden houses and distant hills. The contrast is striking. Ancient ritual meeting everyday life. A famous historical element of these tours is that they help standardize techniques and rules across regions, reinforcing a shared understanding of sumo throughout Japan. A lesser-known detail is that in some places, local customs were blended into the events, small ceremonies, regional foods, even local music. The sport adapted, just enough, to fit its surroundings. Between matches, you help with preparations, smoothing the ring, carrying equipment, assisting where needed. The work is familiar, but the setting makes it feel new. You catch glimpses of landscapes you have never seen before. Mountains rising in the distance, rivers broad and slow. The world feels larger, and so does the path you are on. Sumo is not confined to one stable, one city, one audience. It is a thread running through the country, and you are now part of that thread. In the evenings, as you rest, tired from walking and watching and working, stories are shared, Seniors talk about past tours, about storms weathered on the road, about towns where the crowds were especially generous or especially skeptical. Some mention famous wrestlers who gained early popularity through these journeys, their reputations spreading from village to village. Others speak of injuries that began on the road, small strains that never quite healed. Historians still argue about how much these tours contributed to both the fame and the physical decline of wrestlers. But no one doubts their importance in shaping careers. As you lie on your mat in another unfamiliar room, listening to the distant sounds of the town settling for the night, you feel a mix of weariness and wonder. You are far from the stable, yet still within its discipline. The rituals, the hierarchy, the quiet expectations travel with you, just as surely as your own body does. Tomorrow, the road will continue, more towns, more rings, more eyes watching, and with each step, you understand a little more that being a sumo wrestler in Edo, Japan is not just about standing your ground in a circle of clay. It is also about carrying that circle with you. In your posture, your habits, your sense of who you are. Wherever the long, dusty roads may lead, patrons enter your life quietly at first, like distant silhouettes that gradually take shape as you draw closer. On the road, and later back in Edo, you begin to notice how certain well-dressed figures linger near the ring. How their attendants whisper to stable masters. How small nods and carefully timed smiles pass between men who understand power in different ways. These are the daimyo and wealthy merchants who support sumo. The ones whose coins help build rings, feed stables, and turn strong bodies into celebrated symbols. In the Edo period, it is a well-known historical fact that sumo depended heavily on patronage. Powerful lords sponsored tournaments, funded stables, and sometimes took personal interest in promising wrestlers. Their support was not only about entertainment, it was also about prestige, piety, and politics. Hosting or backing sumo events associated a patron with tradition, strength, and divine favor, all valuable qualities in a society that cared deeply about public image and order. What is less widely known is how personal these relationships could become. A promising wrestler might be invited to a lord's residence, given better robes, or even provided with extra food and servants. For someone like you, still low in rank, this world feels distant, almost unreal, like watching nobles from the shadows of a stage. Yet you can sense its gravity. A single approving glance from the right person can shift a career in subtle but lasting ways. One afternoon, after a regional exhibition, you are instructed to accompany your stable master to a small reception. You stand at the edge of the room, silent, observing. The air smells of incense and fine fabric. Voices are low, formal, layered with courtesy. A daimyo speaks of the beauty of the ceremonies, of the noble spirit shown in the ring. His words are polished, but his eyes are sharp. Assessing, you realize that just as you study opponents for weaknesses and balance, these men study wrestlers for potential and reliability. There is a curious, lesser-known practice you hear about later. Some patrons kept detailed notes on wrestlers they favored, recording not only wins and losses, but temperament, obedience, even how a man behaved at meals. They wanted champions, yes, but also representatives who reflected well on their household. Historians still debate how systematic this was, but surviving accounts suggest that character could matter almost as much as strength. As you return to the stable that evening, the contrast between worlds lingers in your mind. In the yard, you bow, sweep, and train under rules as old as the beams above your head. In the halls of power, you have glimpsed another set of rituals. Equally strict, equally layered with meaning, Sumo stands between these realms. A bridge of flesh and tradition connecting clay and court. You begin to understand that rising in rank will not only change how you are treated in the stable, but how you move through society itself. A higher position could bring you into the orbit of men whose decisions shape provinces, whose favor can bring comfort or whose displeasure can quietly close doors. The ring, small and sacred, is tied by invisible threads to palaces and councils, to prayers and politics. As you lie down to sleep, the day's impressions settle like dust after a long journey. The clang of training, the murmur of the crowd, the soft authority in a daimyo's voice, all of it blends into a single, steady realization. Your life is no longer only your own. With each bout, each gesture, you represent your stable, your teachers, and now, potentially, the interests of powerful patrons. It is a heavy thought, but also a strangely motivating one. You breathe slowly, feeling the familiar ache in your muscles, and let the room fade into shadow. Tomorrow, you will return to the yard, to the drills, to the simple, demanding work of becoming stronger. But somewhere beyond the walls, eyes are watching, measuring, and waiting, and that knowledge, like an extra weight on your shoulders, is beginning to shape the way you stand. Money begins to whisper around the edges of your world, not loudly, not in a way that breaks the calm surface of discipline, but in soft, persistent hints. You hear it in the way townspeople talk after tournaments, in the clink of coins offered to attendants, in the careful, almost reverent way certain spectators lean forward when a bout grows tense. Wagers are being placed, quietly and constantly, like a second, invisible match running alongside the one in the ring. In Edo Japan, gambling on sumo is a well-known historical reality. Officially, it is discouraged, sometimes even banned, but in practice it thrives, finding ways to exist in tea houses, back rooms, and crowded street corners. Men argue over odds with the same passion you bring to balance and footwork. A strong favorite can cause a ripple of excitement, while an unexpected loss can send a wave of groans through the crowd. Like a collective sigh of coins changing hands. You are not supposed to be involved. As a wrestler, your role is to compete, not to speculate. Yet you cannot help but feel the tension in the air when money is at stake. It sharpens everything. The crowd's silence before the charge, their explosive reaction to a throw, the sudden hush when a decision is close, all of it carries the weight of hope and fear that goes beyond pride alone. A senior once tells you, quietly, that in the past, some wrestlers were tempted to listen too closely to these whispers. A nod here, a hesitation there, a bout that ends just a little too quickly or a little too slowly. Most of these stories are cautionary, wrapped in the language of honor and disgrace. The official line is clear. A rikishi must be pure in intent, focused only on the contest and the ritual. And yet, the existence of rules often hints at the existence of temptations. There is a lesser-known detail you learn during a tour stop. In some regions, local gamblers kept informal records of wrestlers' habits, how they started a bout, how they reacted under pressure, whether they tended to rush or wait. These notes were used to place smarter bets, but they also meant that wrestlers were being studied in ways they never agreed to. Historians still debate how widespread and organized these practices were. But enough accounts survive to suggest that the ring was watched not only by fans, but by calculators of risk. You feel this scrutiny one afternoon when you sit at the edge of the arena and notice a group of men speaking in low voices, eyes fixed on the next pair of wrestlers. Their expressions are intent, almost hungry, as if they are trying to see the future in the set of a shoulder or the angle of a foot. It is unsettling, in a subtle way, like realizing that your reflection is being measured for more than just its shape. Back at the stable, the subject is rarely mentioned openly. Discipline is the shield against corruption. Your stable master says, "Train honestly, fight honestly, and the rest will take care of itself." His voice is calm, but there is steel beneath it. In a society that values order and moral clarity, even the hint of impropriety can stain a reputation for life. As you lie down that night, you think about how strange it is that a simple act, two men pushing each other within a circle, can carry so many layers of meaning. Ritual, honor, entertainment, politics, and now money, all overlapping like transparent sheets. You are at the center of it, even when you are not aware of it, your movements sending ripples through worlds you barely see. You decide, quietly, that your focus must remain where it began, on your stance. Your breath, your balance. The clay does not care about coins. The ring responds only to weight, timing, and will. In that simplicity, there is a kind of safety. And as sleep comes, you hold onto that thought, letting it steady you, like placing your feet firmly inside an invisible boundary that nothing else is allowed to cross. The mood in the stable shifts one evening. Subtle at first, like a change in weather you feel in your joints before you see clouds. Voices are lower, movements more careful. Something has happened, and everyone knows it, even if no one is saying it out loud. You sense it in the way juniors avoid certain corners of the room, in the way a senior's usual calm carries a thin edge of tension. Discipline, in a sumo stable, is not abstract. It is immediate, visible, and sometimes frighteningly precise. A wrestler has broken a rule, nothing dramatic to the outside world. Perhaps a late return, a disrespectful word, a failure to follow a direct order. In Edo Japan, such things are not small. Hierarchy is the skeleton of society. And in the heia it is the spine. Bend it, and everything feels the strain. A well-known historical fact is that stables enforced strict codes of behavior, often modeled on samurai ideals of obedience and self-control. Punishments could range from extra chores and isolation to harsh physical training meant to correct both body and attitude. What is less commonly discussed is how public these corrections could be within the stable. The lesson was not only for the one who erred, but for everyone who watched. You see it the next morning. The wrestler in question kneels in the yard, head bowed, while the stable master speaks in a calm, even voice. There is no shouting, no theatrical anger, just a steady listing of what was done wrong and why it cannot be tolerated. The words are measured, but their weight is heavy, like stones placed carefully, one by one, on the chest. Then the punishment is given. Extra training, longer hours, no privileges, complete silence except when spoken to. The man accepts it without protest. His face is still, but his hands tremble slightly as he bows. You realize then that in this world, shame is a powerful force. To fall out of line is not just to disobey, it is to disrupt the order that gives everyone their place and purpose. Historians still debate how much these disciplinary practices were about maintaining performance standards and how much were about reinforcing social hierarchy through ritualized correction. A curious, lesser-known detail emerges in whispers later. Some stables kept written records of major infractions, not to shame the wrestler forever, but to track patterns of behavior, to decide who could be trusted with greater responsibility as they rose in rank. It is, in a way, an early form of character assessment, long before modern ideas of personnel files and evaluations. Whether every stable did this is uncertain, and scholars still argue about how formal these systems truly were. Watching all this, you feel a quiet tightening in your chest. Not fear, exactly, but awareness. The rules are real, the consequences are real. You think of the gamblers, the patrons, the crowds, and how easily a small misstep could ripple outward, staining not just one name, but the reputation of the entire Heya. In a society that prizes harmony and face, personal failure is rarely personal alone. That evening, as you scrub the floor in silence, you notice how the punished wrestler works beside you. Movements steady, expression unreadable. There is no resentment in him, only a focused determination, as if the discipline has sharpened something rather than broken it. You exchange no words, but in that quiet, you understand. Endurance here is not only physical, it is emotional, social, and moral. Lying down later, you replay the scene in your mind. The calm voice, the bowed head, the acceptance. You realize that sumo is not just about how hard you can push, but about how well you can hold yourself within a framework of expectations that is older than you, stronger than you, and, in many ways, indifferent to your individual comfort. Sleep comes slowly, carrying with it a clear, steady thought. To rise, you must not only win, but belong, and belonging here means moving in time with the rules, the rituals, and the quiet, unyielding discipline that binds every body in the stable into a single, ordered whole. The first real warning comes not as a dramatic collapse, but as a small, stubborn pain that refuses to leave. It settles deep in your knee, a dull, persistent ache that greets you each morning like an uninvited guest who has decided to stay for the season. At first, you tell yourself it is nothing. Everyone hurts. Pain is the background music of this life. You stretch, you warm up, you stomp, and for a while the discomfort fades into the general noise of effort. But it always returns. In Edo Japan, the long-term cost of carrying so much weight and absorbing so many impacts was not fully understood in any scientific sense. Yet it was deeply felt. A well-known historical reality is that many wrestlers retired young, their bodies worn down by years of training and competition. What is less often spoken about is how early the signs could appear. Stiff joints in the morning, swelling that never quite went away, a loss of flexibility that made once easy movements feel heavy and uncertain. Historians still debate how much these early symptoms were recognized as warnings and how much were simply accepted as the price of the profession. During training, you begin to notice subtle changes. When you drop into a low stance, your knee hesitates for a fraction of a second before settling. When you pivot near the edge of the ring, there is a faint flash of sharpness, like a thin blade of sensation slicing through the usual dull burn. You hide it well, or at least you think you do. In this world, showing weakness can be as risky as having it. A senior notices anyway. He watches you move, says nothing, but later, as you sit catching your breath, He gestures for you to stay behind. He tells you, quietly, about his own early injuries, about how he learned the difference between pain that builds strength and pain that erodes it. The words are simple, almost casual, but they carry weight. Take care of what carries you. He says, you only get one set. There is a strange, lesser-known practice you learn about in this context. Some Edo-period wrestlers adjusted their training secretly, favoring certain drills, avoiding others, in an attempt to protect injured joints without appearing to slacken. It was a delicate balance. Maintain the appearance of full effort while quietly managing damage. Whether this helped or merely delayed the inevitable is unclear. Historians still argue about how effective such self-regulation could be in a culture that valued endurance over rest. In the bath, you test your knee under the warm water, bending it slowly, feeling the tightness ease just a little. The steam blurs the room, and for a moment it is easy to imagine a future where this ache grows into something heavier. Something that dictates what you can and cannot do. The thought is unsettling, like seeing a shadow at the edge of your vision that you cannot quite turn to face. And yet, you continue. You always do. The rituals, the drills, the bouts, they all go on. And you move with them, carrying your weight, your rank, and now this quiet reminder that your body is not endless. In the larger world of Edo, people age, wear down, and are replaced, and sumo is no different. The ring welcomes new strength as easily as it witnesses old strength fade. That night, as you lie on your mat, the ache pulses softly, in time with your heartbeat. It is not loud enough to keep you awake, but it is present enough to be noticed. You think about longevity, about how long a body like yours can do what is asked of it, and about how the future is shaped not only by victories, but by what you manage to preserve along the way. Sleep finally comes, and with it a gentle acceptance. This life will give you power, respect, and moments of glory. It will also take its toll. Slowly, patiently, the way water wears down stone. And somewhere between those two truths, you will learn what it means not just to be strong, but to last. Ceremony returns to the foreground, as if to remind you that for all the sweat and strain, sumo is also theater, beauty, and carefully preserved tradition. A major tournament approaches, and preparations fill the stable with a different kind of energy. Robes are aired and brushed, top knots carefully reshaped, ceremonial aprons folded with almost reverent precision. Even the air seems to carry a sense of anticipation, like a stage just before the curtain rises. You watch the seniors practice their ring-entering rituals. The doyo iri, slow and majestic, arms sweeping outward, legs lifting high, each movement heavy with symbolism. This is one of the most famous images of sumo, recognized across Edo and beyond. The champion standing in the center of the ring, embodying strength, purity, and divine protection. The crowd will see confidence and grace. You, standing close enough to hear their breathing, see the discipline behind it, the countless repetitions that make every gesture look effortless. In the Edo period, these ceremonies were not decorative additions, they were central to the identity of the sport. Rooted in Shinto, they were meant to purify the ring, honor the gods, and display the wrestler as both athlete and ritual performer. What fewer people realize is how physically demanding these movements are. Holding a leg high, balanced on one foot, in front of thousands of watching eyes, requires strength and control equal to any clash. Historians still debate whether the ritual evolved partly as a test of composure under pressure, as much as a spiritual act. You are allowed to observe closely. Kneeling at the edge of the practice area, the silk of the Kesho Mawashi glints softly in the light, embroidered with dragons, waves, and symbols of good fortune. Each apron tells a story of a patron's wealth, of a stable's pride, of a wrestler's identity. A lesser-known fact is that some of these designs were believed to carry protective meaning. Chosen not only for beauty but for the luck and strength they were thought to represent. Scholars still argue how seriously wrestlers believed in such symbolism, but the care with which these garments are treated suggests they are more than mere decoration. As you help lay out the ceremonial items, fans, towels, cords, you feel the contrast between your daily, practical world and this elevated one. In the morning, you sweep floors and haul water. Now, you handle silk and gold thread, objects meant to be seen by nobles and commoners alike. The transition is seamless, as if the stable itself is teaching you that sumo lives equally in labor and in pageantry. During the actual ceremony, when the day comes, you stand among the lower ranks. Watching from the side, the crowd falls quiet as the yokozuna steps forward, his presence filling the ring the way a mountain fills a valley. The slow clap, the raised arms, the stamping that echoes like thunder held in check, every movement draws a collective breath from the audience. It is beautiful, solemn, and powerful, all at once. In that moment, you understand why this spectacle has endured. It offers something beyond competition. It offers a sense of continuity, of order, of connection to a past that stretches far behind the present moment. And yet, beneath the silk and ceremony, you know the same aches and fears live in those massive bodies. The same quiet negotiations with pain and fatigue that you feel in your own. As the ritual ends and the crowd exhales, you feel a soft stirring of ambition, not the loud, restless kind, but a steady, glowing one. One day, you think, you might stand there too, moving with that measured grace, carrying not just your own weight, but the expectations of tradition and the gaze of the nation. For now, you bow, absorb, and return to your place, letting the beauty of the ceremony settle into you like a calm, deep note that continues to resonate long after the sound has faded. Legends begin to drift through your thoughts the way smoke drifts through a room, soft, curling, impossible to ignore. During quiet moments in the stable, between stretches and chores, seniors tell stories of the great yokozuna of the past, men whose names are spoken with a particular tone, half respect, half awe. In Edo Japan, these figures are more than athletes. They are symbols, walking proof that a human body, shaped by ritual and relentless work, can become something almost mythic. One story returns again and again, that of a towering champion who once dominated an entire era, winning so consistently that the crowd began to expect victory as a matter of course. The way they expect the sun to rise. A well-known historical truth is that certain Edo-period wrestlers achieved such fame that their bouts could draw massive crowds and even influence the scheduling of festivals and markets. People planned their days around the chance to see these giants collide. What you hear less often, in quieter voices, are the small details that make these legends human. One senior mentions that the same champion was said to sleep sitting up because lying flat made his breathing difficult. Another recalls that he practiced balance by standing on one leg for long minutes while reciting prayers. Not as a show, but as a private discipline. These are the kinds of facts that don't always make it into grand stories. Yet they linger in the corners of memory. Historians still debate how much of these anecdotes are accurate and how much have been softened or sharpened by time. But their persistence suggests that greatness was built on habits as much as on raw power. You imagine these men in the same yard where you now stand. Their massive frames going through the same stretches. The same shika. The same early morning cold. It is oddly comforting to think that even legends once shivered. Once fumbled with a knot in their mawashi. Once wondered if their bodies would hold up another day. The distance between you and them feels vast. Yet the path feels strangely familiar. One evening, an older wrestler describes a famous bout from decades past. A match so evenly balanced that it seemed to pause time itself. The two champions pushed and resisted, neither giving an inch, until at last a tiny shift in footing decided everything. The crowd erupted, and the winner became part of sumo lore. You listen, picturing the scene, and realize how thin the line is between anonymity and remembrance. An inch, a breath, a moment of balance or imbalance. A lesser-known detail surfaces in the story. After that legendary match, the victor reportedly returned to his stable and quietly cleaned the ring himself. An act of humility meant to honor the space that had tested him so completely. Whether this truly happened or was added later to underline a moral is unclear. Historians still argue about such episodes, weighing surviving records against the tendency of later generations to wrap heroes in layers of virtue. As you lie down that night, the names and images of these past champions mingle with your own tired thoughts. You feel small in their shadow, but also guided by it, like a traveler following a path worn smooth by countless feet before him. The legends are not distant, unreachable figures. They are reminders of what the discipline, the rituals, the collisions, and the quiet endurance can, over time, produce. And somewhere in the gentle rhythm of your breathing, a wry thought slips in. Every legend, no matter how grand, once had to start by sweeping a floor, tying a knot, and trying not to fall over in front of his seniors. If nothing else, that makes the mountain ahead feel just a little more climbable. Time shifts your position in ways that are almost imperceptible at first. Like the slow movement of shadows across the floor. One morning, you realize that a new face is standing where you once stood. Near the edge of the yard, eyes wide, posture careful, trying not to take up too much space. A boy, younger and narrower than you were when you arrived, watches the seniors with the same mix of awe and nervous calculation. And then, with a quiet jolt of recognition, you understand. To him, you are now one of the seniors. Not a master, not a leader of ceremonies, but no longer the lowest rung. You have weight now, not just in your body, but in your presence. When you walk, others make space without thinking about it. When you speak, it is listened to, even if only for a moment. The hierarchy has shifted, and you have shifted with it, carried forward by time, effort, and the simple fact that you did not quit. In Edo-period sumo stables, this transition was a crucial one. A well-known historical reality is that senior wrestlers were responsible for training and supervising juniors. Passing down techniques, discipline, and etiquette. This was not formal instruction in the modern sense, it was apprenticeship. Imitation, correction through repetition and example. What is less often discussed is how emotionally complex this role could be. To teach was also to remember being taught, often harshly, and to decide which parts of that experience to continue and which to soften. You feel that tension the first time a junior is assigned to train under you. He bows deeply, voice barely above a whisper when he greets you. You return the bow, more briefly, aware of how your posture alone now communicates authority. During drills, you correct his stance, adjusting his hips, lowering his center, showing him how to keep his feet sliding rather than lifting. Your hands are firm but careful. You remember how it felt to be pushed, to be corrected without explanation, and you choose to add a few quiet words where once there had only been pressure. Still, discipline must be maintained. When he grows sloppy with fatigue, you tell him to reset, to breathe, to do it again. Your tone is calm, but there is no room for negotiation. In this, you mirror the seniors who shaped you. Endurance is learned by meeting the same demand repeatedly, until it becomes part of the body's language. A famous historical pattern in sumo is that great champions often became great teachers. Their stables known not just for producing strong wrestlers, but for producing disciplined ones. Techniques, rituals, and even small habits, how to tie the mawashi, how to bow before stepping onto the ring, how to sit in silence, were preserved through this chain of instruction. A lesser-known detail is that some stables had specific house styles. Subtle differences in footwork or grip that could be traced back through generations of teachers. Historians still debate how distinct and consistent these styles truly were, but accounts suggest that identity was carried as much in movement as in name. As you work with the juniors, you notice how they struggle with the same things you once did: balance, patience, the shock of impact, the quiet humiliation of being corrected in front of others. You recognize the tightness in their shoulders, the way they hold their breath without realizing it. You remind them to breathe, to sink, to feel the ground. In doing so, you are reminded of these lessons yourself. Teaching becomes a mirror, reflecting your own habits back at you, revealing where you are solid and where you still wobble. There is one moment, during a particularly long training session, when a junior falters and looks at you with a flicker of frustration in his eyes. Not defiance, just exhaustion and doubt. You meet his gaze and say, softly but clearly, that this feeling will come many times, and that it will always pass if he keeps moving. It is the kind of sentence that sounds simple, almost obvious, yet it carries the weight of years of repetition and recovery. You realize you are no longer just repeating what you were told. You are speaking from lived experience. A curious, lesser-known practice in some Edo stables was that promising juniors were paired with slightly older wrestlers specifically to build loyalty and continuity. These relationships could last for years, forming bonds that went beyond rank. The senior was responsible not only for training, but for guiding behavior, even offering advice about life outside the ring. Historians still argue about how formal these mentorships were, but diaries and oral accounts suggest they played a significant role in shaping both skill and character. As the days pass, you grow accustomed to this new layer of responsibility. It adds a different kind of fatigue, not just in the muscles, but in the attention you must give, the awareness of being watched not only by seniors, but by those who now look to you for cues. Your own movements feel more deliberate, your posture more careful. You are no longer just representing yourself, you are, in a small way, representing the standard you expect from others. At night, as you lie on your mat, you think about the chain you are part of. You were taught, now you teach. The knowledge, the discipline, the rituals flow through you. not stopping, not belonging to you alone, but passing onward. In this, you sense one of the quiet truths of sumo, and of Edo society itself. Strength is not only in the body, but in the continuity of practice, the steady handover from one generation to the next. And with a faint, tired smile, you realize that the boy who once trembled at the edge of the yard is now helping someone else find his footing there. The circle widens, the rhythm continues, and you stand, firmly, in the middle of it. Power, you learn, does not only live in the ring, it also settles into conversations, into seating positions, into who speaks first and who waits. Inside the stable, politics is a quiet thing, rarely named, but always present, like the low hum of a drum you feel more than hear. Decisions about training schedules, pairings, travel, and even which wrestlers are put forward for certain bouts are shaped by relationships, reputation, and the careful balancing of interests. You begin to notice it in small ways. A senior who is favored by the stable master receives more opportunities to face higher-ranked opponents in practice. Another, equally strong, is kept in the background, perhaps because of a past mistake, perhaps because his temperament is considered unreliable. No one announces these judgments, yet everyone feels their effects. In a world that values harmony and order, influence often moves quietly, through suggestion rather than command. In Edo Japan, this is not unusual. The broader society runs on similar currents. Officially, there are rules, ranks, and formal hierarchies. Unofficially, there are alliances, patronage, and the subtle art of maintaining face. A well-known historical reality is that even within rigid systems, personal relationships could shape outcomes. A lord's favor, a teacher's trust, a reputation for obedience or troublemaking. All of these could open doors or close them without a single law being broken. Within the Heia, the stable master stands at the center of this web. His word is final. Yet he listens to many voices, senior wrestlers, patrons, sometimes even temple officials connected to tournaments. You watch him during meetings. His expression calm, his responses measured. He weighs not only strength and results, but character, loyalty, and how each man reflects on the stable as a whole. To him, the stable is not just a group of athletes. It is a living institution with a name, a history, and a future to protect. A lesser-known detail you pick up through whispered conversations is that in some Edo stables, internal rivalries for favor could be as intense as those in the ring. Wrestlers competed not only with their bodies, but with their conduct. Who was more reliable? Who showed better spirit? Who could be trusted to represent the stable before patrons and officials? Historians still debate how openly such competition was encouraged, but personal diaries suggest that the desire for recognition from one's master could be as powerful as the desire for victory. You see an example one afternoon when two seniors, close in rank, both hope to be chosen to lead a ceremonial procession at an upcoming tournament. The role is symbolic, but highly visible, a sign of trust and status. Both train with extra focus. Both are careful in their manners. Both seek small chances to demonstrate diligence. The decision, when it comes, is delivered quietly. One is chosen, the other bows and accepts. But the tension lingers, like a chord that has been struck and not fully dampened. Watching this, you understand that ambition here must be controlled, shaped into something that does not disrupt the surface calm. Open rivalry is for the ring. Outside it, Competition is softened by courtesy and ritual, its sharp edges wrapped in politeness. This does not make it weaker, it makes it more complex. There is also the matter of patrons, whose interests sometimes intersect with the stable's internal dynamics. A wealthy supporter may express interest in a particular wrestler, praising his style, hinting at future opportunities. Such attention can elevate a man's standing almost overnight, and with it, expectations and scrutiny. Others may feel the shift, even if no one speaks of it directly. In this way, influence flows in from outside, subtly reshaping the balance within. A curious, lesser-known practice is that some stable masters kept private notes on their wrestlers, recording not just wins and losses, but behavior, reliability, and how each man handled pressure. These notes were not official records, but personal tools for decision-making. Historians still argue about how systematic this was, but enough references exist to suggest that leadership in sumo, as in many institutions, relied on quiet observation and long memory. You feel these currents without being fully entangled in them. At least not yet. Your role is still mostly to train, to teach the juniors under you, to show steadiness and respect, but you are no longer blind to the layers beneath the surface. When a pairing is announced, you wonder why. When a senior is absent from a demonstration, you notice. The stable is not just a place of sweat and ritual, it is a small political world. Negotiating status, trust, and the future with every choice. One evening, as you sit with another mid-ranked wrestler, he speaks softly about how important it is to remain consistent. Strength is seen, he says, but character is remembered. The phrase stays with you. In a system where advancement is gradual and reputation long-lived, a single moment of poor judgment can echo for years, while steady reliability can slowly, almost invisibly, lift a man upward. As you lie down that night, the familiar ache in your body mingles with a new awareness. Your path is shaped not only by how hard you push in the ring, but by how you move within this network of expectations and relationships. The clay circle may decide the outcome of a bout, but the space around it, the stable, the patrons, the quiet politics of trust and favor, helps decide the shape of a career. You breathe, slow and even, and let the thought settle. To survive and to rise here, you must learn not only to balance your weight, but to balance yourself within a world where power speaks softly, remembers everything, and, like the ring itself, has boundaries that are best understood before you reach them. The spiritual weight of sumo begins to feel heavier now, not in the loud, ceremonial way that draws crowds, but in a quieter, more personal sense. You find yourself thinking more often about the small shrine in the corner of the yard, about the way your hands come together almost automatically before training, about the rhythm of bowing that has slipped from conscious act into instinct. What once felt like tradition layered on top of physical work now feels woven into it, as inseparable as breath and movement. In Edo, Japan, sumo is deeply tied to Shinto. A well-known historical fact, the ring is sacred ground. The rituals are acts of purification, and the wrestlers are, in a sense, living offerings of strength and vitality. The sport is meant to please the gods, to ensure harmony between human effort and divine favor. Yet what is less often spoken of is the quiet pressure this places on the men who step into the ring. You are not just competing, you are representing something spiritual, something meant to reflect order and balance in the world. Before one important training session, a priest visits the stable. He offers prayers, waves a purification wand, and murmurs words that blend into the soft rustle of paper streamers. You kneel with the others, head bowed, feeling the floor cool beneath your hands. The ceremony is brief, but its effect lingers. It is a reminder that the space you train in is not merely practical, it is symbolically charged, layered with meaning built up over centuries. A lesser-known belief you hear whispered among the seniors is that a wrestler's inner state can affect the ring itself. If a man carries anger, arrogance, or unresolved shame, it is said to cloud the doyo, making his movements heavy, his timing off. Whether this is true in any mystical sense is impossible to prove. Historians still debate how seriously such ideas were taken, and how much they served as moral instruction rather than spiritual doctrine. Yet the language of purity and impurity shapes how you think about your own mind as well as your body. You notice it in yourself during training. On days when your thoughts are scattered, when pride or frustration creeps in, your balance feels less certain. On days when you move with quiet focus, when you accept correction without resistance, your stance feels rooted, your reactions smoother. It is tempting to see this as proof that the old beliefs are right, that the gods or the spirits are somehow guiding your feet. Or perhaps it is simply the effect of calm attention on muscle and nerve. The line between the two is thin, and in this world, no one feels the need to draw it too sharply. One evening, an older wrestler tells you a story about a famed Edo champion who, after a string of victories, became careless in ritual, rushing through bows, treating ceremonies as empty gestures. Soon after, his performance declined. He blamed injury, then bad luck, but the elders said his spirit had grown unbalanced. Whether the tale is history or parable is unclear. Historians still argue about how such narratives were shaped to reinforce humility and respect for tradition. What matters is the lesson. Strength without reverence is thought to be unstable, like a tower built without a proper foundation. As you reflect on this, you feel a subtle shift in how you approach the small acts of the day. You bow a little more fully. You take an extra breath before stepping onto the practice ring. You touch the ground with a hint of gratitude, not just habit. These gestures cost nothing in effort, yet they seem to steady something inside you, as if aligning your thoughts with the rhythm that has guided countless wrestlers before. The burden of this spiritual role is not heavy in a dramatic way. It does not press down like weight on your shoulders. It settles instead like a responsibility to move correctly, not only in technique, but in intention, to be strong without being disruptive, to be confident without being careless, to remember that the ring, the stable, and the traditions you serve are larger than your individual ambitions. As night falls and the lamps cast soft light across the wooden beams, you sit quietly, listening to the low sounds of the stable. Somewhere, a bell from a distant shrine drifts through the air, faint but clear. You breathe in, slow and deep, and feel the day's effort settle into your body. In this stillness, you understand that sumo is not only carving your muscles and testing your endurance. It is shaping your inner posture as well, teaching you how to stand within something ancient, how to carry strength without letting it harden into arrogance, how to move with respect for forces you cannot see but are taught. From the first bow onward, to acknowledge, the peak does not announce itself with trumpets. It arrives quietly, almost modestly, wrapped in routine, until you realize one day that your name is being spoken a little more often, that your matches are being watched a little more closely, that the stable master's eyes linger on you with a new kind of attention. You are in the middle of a tournament now, not at the very top, but high enough that the bouts feel heavier, the opponents more seasoned, the margins for error thinner than ever. Each morning, as you prepare, your body carries both strength and the memory of strain. The knee that once whispered now speaks more clearly, though it still allows you to move, to push, to pivot. You warm it carefully, feeling the joint loosen, telling yourself, half in discipline, half in hope, that it will hold for one more day. Then one more after that. In the ring, you cannot afford to think about what might fail. You must think only about what is in front of you. The crowd is larger than you have ever seen it. The air hums with anticipation, the kind that makes your skin prickle even before you step onto the clay. When your name is called, there is a ripple of recognition. Not thunderous, not yet, but real. You bow, enter the ring, and feel the familiar coolness under your feet, the boundary that defines everything. Your opponent is strong, experienced, the kind of man who has learned to conserve energy, to wait for mistakes rather than force them. You crouch, fingertips brushing the clay, and for a moment the world narrows to breath and balance. The signal comes. You launch. The clash is powerful, clean, the sound echoing through the arena. You feel his weight, his resistance, the way he tries to draw you into a contest of raw force. Instead, you shift, just enough, using the lessons of footwork and awareness drilled into you over years. You feel a tiny opening, a fraction of a second when his center rises. You take it. The movement is not dramatic, not flashy, it is precise. A turn of the hips, a drive from the legs, a redirection of his momentum. He stumbles, catches himself, but the edge is there. You press, guiding him toward the boundary. The crowd inhales as one. Then his foot touches the straw. The referee signals. It is over. For a heartbeat, everything is still. Then the sound breaks. A wave of voices, of approval, of surprise. You bow, heart pounding, and step back. Another win, not by luck, not by brute force alone, but by timing and control. This is the kind of victory that feels different, deeper, as if it belongs to a version of you that has been slowly forming for years. A well-known historical pattern in Edo Sumo is that careers often hinge on a single tournament. A run of strong performances that marks a wrestler as someone to watch. Someone whose name begins to circulate beyond the stable. This feels like that moment. What is less often spoken of is how fragile such peaks can be. A slight injury, a single misjudged step, and the arc can bend downward just as quickly. Historians still debate how many promising careers faded at this exact point. Balanced between rise and decline. Between bouts, you sit quietly, eyes closed, letting your breathing settle. The knee aches, the shoulder throbs, but the rhythm of your breath steadies you. You think of the legends, of the rituals, of the long chain of training that has brought you here. You think, briefly, of how strange it is that something as simple as staying inside a circle can carry such weight. Another match, another test. Each time you step onto the ring, you feel the same focus, the same narrowing of the world, and each time, you find that your body responds, that your mind stays clear, that the small adjustments you have practiced now appear without conscious thought. It is as if the years of repetition have finally aligned, producing a moment where effort and ability meet without friction. By the end of the day, you are exhausted, But there is a quiet glow beneath the fatigue. You have held your ground. You have moved with control. You have proven, to yourself and to those watching, that you belong at this level. The stable master's nod is slightly deeper than before. A senior claps you once on the shoulder, firm and approving. As you return to the Heya that evening, the sounds of the crowd still echo faintly in your ears. You sit, stretch, and feel the ache settle in like an old companion. There is pride, yes, but also an awareness of how much this has cost, and how much it will continue to cost. This is the peak, or at least one of them. A place where strength, timing, and opportunity have lined up just long enough for you to stand in their center. You breathe, slowly, letting the day fade, knowing that in sumo, as in life, no peak lasts forever, but that the memory of standing on one, even briefly, can carry you through many long, difficult slopes that follow. The first signs of decline arrive quietly, almost politely, like a guest who knocks instead of barging in. You notice it in the morning, when your body takes a little longer to warm, when the familiar stiffness in your knee spreads into your hip, when your shoulders feel as if they slept under a pile of damp blankets. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would make anyone gasp. Just a subtle delay between intention and movement, like a thought that takes an extra heartbeat to become action. In training, you still push hard, still meet the charges, still hold your ground, but there are moments, brief, almost embarrassing in their smallness, when you are a fraction late. A step that should slide does so a hair slower. A twist that once felt effortless now asks for a conscious effort. It's the difference between catching a falling cup and watching it tip just a little too far. The kind of difference no one notices at first, except you. A well-known historical pattern in Edo sumo is that many wrestlers experienced this phase after a peak tournament, a period where results remained respectable. But the sharp edge began to soften. Victories became harder, recovery longer. What is less often mentioned is how mentally disorienting this could be. You are still strong, still skilled, and yet, something is subtly shifting, like the tide turning under a boat that appears to be floating just fine. Historians still debate how much of this change was purely physical wear and how much came from accumulated fatigue and the pressure of years spent performing under ritual and expectation. During a bout, you feel it clearly for the first time. The clash is solid, your stance low, your balance good. You sense an opening and move to take it, only to find your opponent has already adjusted. He isn't faster in an obvious way, he's just a breath ahead. The moment passes, you recover, continue, and the match ends without disaster. But the realization lingers like a soft echo. You had the idea, but your body delivered it a touch late. Afterward, you sit with your back against the wall, breathing slowly, and let the crowd's noise wash over you. You joke, quietly, that maybe the ring has started shrinking when no one was looking. Or that the clay has developed a personal grudge against your favorite foot. Or that time itself has decided to start using you as a demonstration model. The humor is gentle, the kind you use not to deny what's happening, but to make room for it. A lesser-known detail from Edo stables is that older wrestlers were sometimes given slightly altered training roles during this phase. Not officially, but in practice, more emphasis on teaching, on controlled drills, on preserving strength rather than constantly testing its limits. It was a way of easing the body without announcing retreat. Some accepted this transition smoothly. Others resisted it fiercely, pushing as if willpower alone could rewind the clock. Accounts suggest both approaches existed, and their outcomes varied. In the bath that evening, you stretch your leg and feel the joint respond with a dull, familiar protest, not pain that stops you, just pain that reminds you it is there. Keeping count, you think of the legends, of how even the greatest eventually spoke of heavy mornings and slow starts. You had always imagined those phrases as distant, almost poetic. Now they are simply descriptive. Yet, there is also a strange calm in recognizing the shift. You are not falling off a cliff, you are walking down a gentle slope. You still know the ring. You still feel its boundaries. You still understand timing and balance, even if your body now negotiates with them instead of obeying instantly. Experience begins to lean in where speed leans out, offering its quiet compensation. As night settles and the stable grows still, you lie on your mat and listen to the soft breathing around you. The rhythm is steady, reassuring. You realize that decline is not the end of the story, it is a change in its tone. The music slows, the notes stretch, but the melody continues. You close your eyes, letting the day's effort dissolve into warmth and heaviness, and accept this new phase the way you accept fatigue after training, not with resistance, but with understanding. The body has carried you far. Now it is asking to be carried, just a little, by patience, by awareness, and by the quiet knowledge that even as the edge softens, the shape you have become does not simply disappear. The decision begins as a question you do not dare to ask out loud. It surfaces in the quiet moments, when you are alone with your breath, when the yard is empty, when the ring is just a circle of packed earth without the noise and color that usually surround it. How long can I do this? Not in a dramatic, end-of-the-road way, but in a practical, almost gentle way, like asking how much daylight is left before evening truly settles. In Edo, Japan, retirement from sumo was rarely a single, clean moment. A well-known historical reality is that most wrestlers did not announce their departure with ceremony. They simply began to appear less, to be paired less, to step aside more often for younger bodies that moved with the speed and certainty theirs once had. What is less often spoken of is how heavy the internal struggle could be before that quiet fading. The ring had been the center of life, the measure of worth, the place where identity was tested and confirmed. To imagine life without it was to imagine standing without a shadow. You feel the question most clearly after a hard practice. Your knee throbs, your lower back is tight, and the familiar warmth of fatigue carries a sharper edge than it used to. You sit, watching the juniors train, their movements raw, fast, full of that restless energy you remember having. One of them charges too eagerly, loses balance, and nearly falls. You almost smile. You know that moment. You have lived it. You have learned how to survive it. A senior sits beside you. A man who has been in the stable longer than most, whose body carries the quiet stiffness of years. He says little, but his presence itself is a lesson. He tells you, in a low voice, that there comes a time when strength must learn to change its shape. That staying in the ring is one kind of courage. Knowing when to leave it is another. The words are simple, but they settle into you like stones placed carefully in water, creating ripples that move outward and do not quickly fade. There is a lesser-known practice from some Edo stables that you hear about around this time. Wrestlers nearing the end of their competitive years were sometimes encouraged to imagine their future role before officially stepping down: coach, attendant, ceremonial figure, or even returning to civilian life with the status they had earned. This mental preparation was meant to soften the shock of transition, to prevent the sudden emptiness that could follow the loss of daily structure and purpose. Historians still debate how formal this process was, but personal accounts suggest that many men were quietly guided through it by their seniors. You begin, without quite realizing it, to do the same. You picture yourself not only inside the ring, but beside it, correcting a stance, teaching a junior to feel the boundary with his heels, explaining the small things that are never written down, how to listen to the ground, how to breathe when fear tightens the chest, how to bow in a way that is neither rushed nor stiff. These images do not feel like endings. They feel like continuations, just in a different rhythm. Still, the thought of stepping away carries a weight that presses gently but constantly. Sumo has given you shape, routine, respect, a place in a lineage that stretches back beyond memory. To loosen your grip on that identity feels like opening your hands after holding something heavy for years. Relief mixed with the strange sensation that the weight is still there, even when the object is gone. One evening, after prayers, you remain in the yard while others drift away. The ring lies quiet, its surface smooth, its boundary clear even in the dim light. You step onto it alone, not to train, not to test yourself, but simply to stand. You feel the cool clay under your feet, the familiar grounding, the invisible line that has defined so much of your life. You bow, slowly, not as part of a ceremony, but as a personal acknowledgement. Historians still debate how consciously wrestlers of the Edo period marked this moment for themselves. How often such solitary acts of reflection occurred. Records are sparse, and feelings leave little trace on paper. Yet it is hard to believe that men who lived so intensely within this space did not, at some point, stand quietly and consider what it meant to step away from it. You breathe, steady and deep, and let the question exist without forcing an answer. Retirement is no longer an abstract future. It is a shape on the horizon, faint but visible, like a mountain seen through morning mist. You do not rush toward it, and you do not turn your back on it. You simply acknowledge that it is there, waiting, and that one day, when the time is right, you will walk toward it with the same discipline and calm that once carried you into the ring. Life after the ring does not begin with a clean break. It seeps in gradually, like evening light creeping across the floor, softening edges without asking permission. You find yourself spending a little more time on the side of the yard, watching rather than charging, listening rather than straining to be heard over the thud of bodies. The clay circle is still there, still sacred, still calling, but its voice has changed. It no longer shouts your name. It hums it, gently, like a memory. Your body, too, has learned a new rhythm. The knee still reminds you of its presence each morning. A polite but persistent knock, as if to say, yes, we're still traveling together. The shoulders loosen more slowly. The back prefers warmth and patience to sudden effort. You stretch longer, breathe deeper, and accept that warming up now feels less like flipping a switch and more like persuading an old friend to get out of bed. You joke quietly to yourself that even your joints are embracing the concept of taking their time. A very Edo way of saying they have developed a refined sense of ceremony. Around you, the stable continues its cycle. New faces arrive, eyes bright, movements awkward with hope and fear. They bow, they stumble, they learn, and you, without quite planning it, become part of the scenery they look to for cues. A nod from you calms them. A small correction steadies them. A single word, Lower. Breathe. Again. Lands with more weight than you expect. It is strange how authority grows. Not from shouting, but from simply having been there long enough to know. In the wider world of Edo, this transition is mirrored in many lives. A well-known historical reality is that warriors, artisans, and officials often shifted roles as their bodies aged, moving from the front lines of action to positions of guidance and administration. The value of experience was recognized, even in a society that admired youthful strength. Sumo followed a similar pattern. Retired or semi-retired wrestlers frequently remained connected to their stables as coaches, attendants, or ceremonial figures, carrying the knowledge of decades into the next generation. What is less commonly discussed is how emotionally complex this shift could be. The ring had been a place where your worth was proven in moments of intense clarity. You were either in or out, standing or fallen. Life outside that circle is more blurred. Progress is measured in the growth of others, in the slow accumulation of trust, in the quiet satisfaction of seeing a junior execute a movement you once struggled with. Historians still debate how wrestlers of the Edo period adjusted psychologically to this change, as personal writings are scarce. But the structure of stable life suggests that continuity, not isolation, was the intended remedy. One afternoon, you work with a young wrestler who reminds you of yourself in the early days, eager, strong, but a little too tense. Like a bowstring pulled tight and left that way. You show him how to sink his weight, how to feel the ground rather than fight it. He tries, fails, tries again, and finally finds the balance. His face lights up with the small, pure joy of understanding. You smile, and for a moment, it feels like winning a bout, except the victory echoes outward instead of inward. There is a lesser-known custom you hear about during this period, in some Edo stables. Older wrestlers would symbolically lend their spirit to promising juniors by sharing a meal in a quiet, formal way, a gesture meant to pass on not just technique, but resilience and composure. Whether this was widespread or more of a poetic tradition is unclear. Historians still argue about how literal such practices were. But the idea captures something true about mentorship in this world, the sense that strength is not only built, but transmitted, through presence and example. You also begin to notice the city beyond the stable more clearly. The streets of Edo, once just a path between training and tournaments, now feel like a living backdrop to your life. You hear the calls of merchants, the laughter from tea houses, the distant music of festivals. You realize that while the ring is a powerful center, it is not the only one. There is a world of ordinary rhythms, of people who will never step onto clay, yet who carry their own burdens and ambitions with quiet dignity. A famous historical event often mentioned in this context is the formal establishment of retired wrestlers as stable elders in later Edo years, a role that helped preserve techniques and rituals during times of change. This institutional memory became especially important as political and social shifts began to reshape Japan. What is less often noted is how personal this preservation was, relying on men who had felt the ground, the weight, the fear, and the focus in their own bodies, and could therefore teach not just movements, but states of mind. At night, when the stable grows quiet, you sometimes sit alone and listen to the sounds that once framed your days, the faint rustle of robes, the soft creak of wood, the distant hum of the city settling. Your breathing is slower now, deeper, like a tide that knows its own timing. You think about how the ring has shaped you, how it taught you where your balance lies, not just in your stance, but in your life. There is humor in this stage, too. If you let yourself see it, you catch yourself offering advice that sounds suspiciously like something an old master would say. And then you remember that, to someone, you are now that figure. You almost laugh at the thought, because inside, you still feel like the boy who once worried about tying his mawashi correctly and not being late for chores. Time, it seems, has a gentle sense of irony. As you lie down, the day's images drift through your mind, the focused faces of juniors, the quiet authority of the stable master, the ever-present circle of the ring. You are no longer defined solely by how you push or resist within that boundary. You are defined by how you help others find their footing there, by how you carry the traditions forward without letting them become rigid or lifeless. Life after the ring, you are learning, is not an empty space left behind. It is a widening one, filled with echoes of movement, of breath, of discipline, and of care. The clay circle may no longer be the center of your actions, but it remains the center of your understanding, a place that taught you how to stand, how to fall, and how, in the quiet after both, to remain. The echoes of glory fade the way sound does in a long wooden hall, slowly, gently, until what remains is not silence, but a soft awareness that something once rang here. You walk through the stable now with an ease that comes from years of knowing where every board creaks and where every beam catches the light. The ring still sits at the center, its clay surface smoothed and resmoothed, as if time itself keeps brushing it clean, preparing it for the next story. You watch a tournament from the side, no longer as a contender, but as a quiet witness. The crowd's roar rises and falls like surf, and you feel it not in your chest, but in memory. A young wrestler steps onto the dohyo, eyes bright, stance a little too eager, and you recognize the tension in his shoulders. You almost want to tell him to breathe, to sink, to trust the ground. You don't, because he must learn it the way you did, through his own balance, his own stumbles, his own small victories. A well-known historical moment often spoken of in Edo is the public retirement of a respected rikishi, marked not by a final bout, but by a ceremonial bow and the quiet passing of his kesho mawashi to the stable. It was a visible acknowledgement that one chapter had closed and another had begun. What is less commonly remembered is that many such men continued to attend tournaments for years, sitting among the attendants, their presence a living bridge between generations. You notice how the rituals remain unchanged. The salt still scatters like pale snow. The referee's robes still sway with measured grace. The ring still demands the same respect. And yet, every body that enters it brings something new. Historians still debate how much the style and spirit of sumo truly changed over the Edo period, and how much of that change came from individuals whose names were never written down, but whose movements quietly shaped the rhythm of the sport. There's a gentle humor in watching now. You find yourself thinking that the ring looks smaller than it used to, as if it shrank when you weren't looking. Or perhaps your sense of space simply grew. You also notice how loudly the crowd gasps at moments that once felt ordinary to you. And you smile at how drama and routine can be the same thing, depending on where you stand. And when a wrestler slips in an almost comically awkward way, you catch yourself thinking, kindly, "Ah, the clay claims its taxes from everyone." A lesser-known custom you hear about is that some retired wrestlers kept a small pouch of ring clay, carried like a talisman, a reminder of where they had learned to stand. Whether this was widespread or just a poetic habit of a few is unclear. Historians still argue about how much sentimentality existed in a culture that valued discipline over nostalgia. But watching the bouts now, you understand how a piece of that ground could feel like a piece of a life. As evening settles, lanterns glow, and the crowd thins, the ring is swept one last time, its surface left smooth and quiet. You bow to it, not out of duty, but out of gratitude. It taught you where your balance was. It taught you how to meet pressure without panic. It taught you that strength can be loud in collision and gentle in patience. And as you turn away, the echoes follow you, not as noise, but as warmth, a steady, low hum of memory and meaning that stays with you long after the clay has cooled and the banners have been taken down. The night grows softer now. Your breathing slows, each inhale and exhale stretching a little longer than the one before. Like waves easing onto a quiet shore, the images of the stable, the ring, the rituals, and the long road of effort begin to blur at the edges. Not disappearing, just settling into a gentle haze. You imagine the clay circle under moonlight, empty and calm, holding the imprint of countless feet that once pressed into it with hope, fear, strength, and determination. You imagine the wooden beams above it, listening to centuries of breath and movement, now resting in stillness. Everything that was loud and heavy during the day becomes light and distant at night. Your own body, wherever you are listening from, feels heavy in the pleasant way that comes before sleep. Muscles loosen, thoughts stretch and yawn. The world narrows to the simple rhythm of air moving in and out. The quiet reassurance that you are safe, that you are resting, that nothing more is asked of you right now. Just as the wrestler learned to trust the ground beneath his feet, you can trust the bed or the chair or the floor supporting you. Just as he learned to let effort fade after the bout, you can let the day fade after its long run of moments. There is no need to hold on tightly. The story has done its work. The echoes have settled. In the soft dark, you carry only what is gentle, the sense of balance, the warmth of endurance, the calm that comes when a long journey is allowed to pause. The ring is quiet, the stable sleeps, the city beyond drifts into silence. And you, breathing slowly, are welcome to drift with it. End of script. Sweet dreams.